All right, good evening and welcome to the Chaska City Council meeting for Monday, September 21st, 2020. We're here again at the Chaska Event Center. Will you please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, everyone. Again, I want to make this announcement. You notice that once we are seated, we take our mask off. We found out that we're having difficulty, that the audience is unable to hear us as well. I know the people at home can hear us because of the speaker system we have, but not in person. So we are taking our mask off. We ask everyone in the audience to please wear their mask unless they come up to speak, which would be up here at this table. And you'd have to do that if you you do need to speak. So with that, we'll move into Nate, call roll, please.
Councilmember Hatfield.
Here.
Councilmember Hubbard. Here. Councilmember Wong. Here. Councilmember Grau.
Here.
Mayor Winchell.
Here. Moves us to item 4, adopting the agenda. If there are no corrections or additions, I'd entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Motion by Councilmember Wong.
Second.
Second by Councilmember Hatfield. Now I know who's speaking down there when I hear now. Sometimes I'm never quite sure. Discussion. Hearing none. Councilmember Wong.
Aye.
Councilmember Hatfield.
Aye.
Councilmember Grau.
Aye.
Councilmember Hubbard.
Aye.
Mayor Winchell, yes. Passes 5-0. Moves us to visitor presentation. Is there anyone here that'd like to speak on visitor presentation? I see no one moving, so I'll move forward. Next, we move to item 6. Oh, yeah, I had no one's on in the waiting room. Thanks, Kevin. That one I'm gonna have to figure out one of these days. Moves us to item 6, consent items. Again, if there are no corrections or additions, I'd entertain a motion. And if someone needs to speak about any one of the items, do so, please.
I just had one question in regards to street names.
Which one?
Street names, it'd be 6, or first one, the renaming of Cardinal Street.
Okay.
My question just has to do with like how do we get street names? Is that the development proposes that? The city proposes that? It's an interesting choice of a name. In general, it caught my eye, but I was just curious more in general.
Yeah, it's typically the developer that proposes those. It's sort of interesting as you go from development to development across the city, you can sort of tell what theme they used. We have a number of them that are like developers' kids' names. So I mean, it's sort of interesting, some of the stories behind it. A lot of times it might be names of families that used to live on the property, things like that, but it is a developer that drives that.
So if I'm looking at this map correctly, basically the reason that it gets renamed is that Cardinal goes in at a 90-degree angle to Del Webb. And so that now Stargaze Point kind of becomes an orphaned road basically because it's not connected to Cardinal anymore. Am I looking at that map correctly?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. So that's fine. I just had concerns with if it was still connected where it just annoys me personally when you're on one street and the street name changes, but in this case it wouldn't because it is a completely separate street of Cardinal Street.
Will now be a turn off of it, correct?
Right.
I don't think I could get into the map on that one.
That's my questions. I was just curious.
It's just really the 2 houses below that would change their addresses, correct? And one's not even there, so that'll be an easy change. That's usually the biggest thing about people that have had an address for 50 years and we change their names or their address, so. Okay. Anyone else with a question? Okay, I'd entertain a motion to approve consent.
So moved.
Motion by Councilmember Hatfield.
Second.
Second by Councilmember Grau. Discussion. Hearing none. Councilmember Hatfield.
Yes.
Councilmember Grau.
Yes.
Councilmember Hubbard.
Yes.
Councilmember Wong.
Aye.
Mayor Winchell, aye. Passes 5-0. Moves us then into Item 7, action items. Adopt resolution 2020-80, establish city tax levy for taxes payable 2021.
Mayor and Councilor, I will be going over a presentation, but really quick, under state statute, local communities are required to establish a maximum tax levy by the end of September. And the purpose of establishing that maximum tax levy is to provide a number that the county can send out in truth and taxation statements, which go out in early November, to each individual tax owner to be able to indicate if the taxing jurisdiction, be it school district, county, city, were to establish a levy at this amount for the next year, what would be any change that you'd see in your actual individual tax situation. So it's preliminary in the nature that it's not the final budget or final levy that's chosen. That's actually done in December at the second meeting of December. The first meeting we actually have as our truth and taxation hearing, which is basically an opportunity for us to present our budget for next year, proposed tax levy, and then take any comments from the public, any questions or things that they might have of that. So this is part of the process. Once we establish this levy tonight, it can go down but cannot go up after that. So that's sort of the stipulations that we need to play by. So I'm going to share my screen here. And boy.
Am I on video? It says start my video. No, I am.
Great. Trying to get to the presentation second.
While Matt's getting ready here, one thing I want to talk, I'll just kind of talk about is that this year we had a little different budget process where we really had, where we had options, different things. We've never had that type of thing. Generally, things have been going pretty well and we set our budget, but with all the craziness that COVID caused and things like that, this is the first time that we've really had an option to say, well, I think we really need to do that. And I think it's a good process, especially through this time that we're going through, is that ability to say, I think that that's important to our community, that I think we should have that. We had a lot of these discussions that we did in work sessions. This is the first time publicly televised that we will actually be discussing this budget. And again, like Matt said, this is where we picked the preliminary levy. We can't raise it after tonight, but we can always lower it. So, and then I'll let Matt go back into this discussion. So.
Long time.
Well, I had to do dead airspace there. I had to do something for you.
All right, so I have the presentation up here now. So first thing I'm going to talk about is just the items that we talked about during the 2020 budget year. And I think these are important. So this is the current budget year. So I think it's important to really understand the things we talked about during the 2020 budget session, because it really sort of leads into some of the decisions that need to be made during the 2021 budget establishment. So, you know, the three main things we talked about our annual projects to be funded through our capital improvement program. So as we have since 2017, we have $1 million that we set aside for our capital improvement programs to be able to go towards things like street overlays, seal coats, trail overlays, playground replacements, shelter replacements, anything that really has met its life. and needs to get replaced. Continued utilization of our tax levy policy, which we'll talk about in a bit, and then also addressing plans or initiating a plan to address the findings of a staffing study. So if you remember last year, we did a staffing study, or we had completed it before last year, really indicating where our staffing needs were currently and any gaps that we had based on the services that we currently provide. And then also looking at planning for staffing as we go over the next 20 years. And the biggest issue that popped up out of that was really the staffing gap shortage we had for our current services. We identified 16 positions that we were short, and basically at the same time identified shortfall in our building maintenance activities. So dollars actually go towards our building maintenance. And so last year we did adopt a plan to go through a 4-year process of basically fully funding that plan. We got through a little bit of the first year this year, and then COVID hit. And we did end up having to cut back on some of that. And then the discussion will be whether we think this is a time to continue to move forward or put a pause on it. So our budgeting objectives, so these are the most important things as we look at is, what do we want to accomplish through our budgeting process? Our budget document basically indicates our priorities in the community and what we want to put our dollars towards. So, supporting programs to help strengthen Chaska's mission of being the best small town in Minnesota. Looking at our existing tax levy policies, that we limit tax levy growth to capture only new growth in the community and expenditure inflations. That we'd only increase the levy beyond that point if new service levels or assets are being added. Maintain our existing high quality service levels, fully fund our maintenance and replacement of our vehicles, equipment, and physical assets on a regular schedule so that we ensure sustainability of our investments already made. Fund new programs only after existing necessary programs are funded. Budget to utilizing a plan to avoid drawdowns in our city's general fund reserves. Fully fund levy needs of our street reconstruction program, and then develop a long-term budget plan that is sustainable from a resource perspective to support the service levels residents expect. So the big thing to talk about this year is really the environment in which we are budgeting. So 2020, again, I think it's important to look at this because 2020 was something we started out the beginning of the year thinking one thing, and then almost instantaneously within about 3 months, we realized it was going to be something different. So the COVID pandemic crisis obviously started in mid-March and had an immediate impact on our revenues. The most dramatic impact that we've seen are really in our recreational enterprise funds of the community center and the Curling Event Center, primarily because we had to have those closed down for about a 5-month period. Actually, coincidentally, and John's here, our golf courses actually have done very well this year, as many golf courses as people I think have stayed closer to home and looked for outside type of entertainment. It also had an impact on our general fund revenues, including our administration fees from the enterprise funds, our building permits, some taxes, so a number of different revenue sources. And so based on those changes on July 6th, we did have the council act on adopting an amendment to our 2020 budget, which basically reduced our expenditures by about $750,000, reducing our CIP program by about $275,000, our plan positions, staffing plan implementation by $380,000. We reduced some special events and just a multitude of other things like conferences, education, travel, those types of things. So again, $750,000. The budget environment factors that we look at this year, first of all, our market value increases have really begun to slow in 2021. If you look back at the history from 2015 to 19, with the exception of 2016 where we saw a lower increase, all of our increases have been over 5% as far as market value growth. 2020, we're seeing an overall increase of 2.8%, with a 1.8% of that coming from new growth. And that's important to know because that sort of fits into our policy, is looking at that new growth in the community. 2021 is the first year we have a certified $0 amount from LGA. We've got down to pretty low, but this is the first time it's nothing. Our administrative fees from enterprise funds have been impacted. So, we've seen some hits of less electric usage, although this year was a very hot year. So some of that got mitigated. But we also saw that, funds like our community center and Sterling Center that were closed for several months were not able to contribute as much in administrative fees to help support those general administrative services. And our building permits have slowed over the past year. It's been pretty steady from a residential perspective. We've seen pretty steady residential builds really for the last 12 plus months. Larger type of although that could change next year there, but given the uncertainty of the market, it's hard to plan around those items. So this chart gives a breakdown of the basically all of the different categories and shows on the bottom right-hand corner the 2.8% total increase that we saw in market values, and the new growth is just a couple columns or a couple of cells above that is the 1.8%. You can see apartments saw the greatest amount of increase in the community, and it was really sort of a mixture between some of the new construction that was built a couple of years ago just coming online, and then also some market change, which sort of fits what we're seeing is that there's pretty low vacancies in apartments in the community and in a lot of suburban apartments. And so we'd expect to see a little bit more robust growth in there. This is our distribution of market values in the community. We have a real good mix. So we have 75% is residential, but we do have 12% that's commercial industrial, 7% that's apartment. And the ag is really sort of that undeveloped property in the community that's still left to develop. The residential since last year has increased in its share of the pie. I think when we see the full development of the community, you'll see that balance out a lot more because we do have rather large industrial park on the west end of the community that will be part of future development. This gives a graph of the, just sort of looking back from 2006. So this would be pre-recession to projecting out into over the 5-year period. But one thing that I had pointed out a few years ago is that it took practically 8 years to recover all the lost market value growth that we saw during the course of the Great Recession. But we have seen steady increases, but those increases have slowed recently. We project 2% over the next 5 years just to try to be conservative, although our average over the last 5 years has been 5.51%, but most of that growth came actually before the growth for this year. Another thing to point out is, the difference between 2020 for what we're seeing for next year compared to this year. So last year we saw a 9.7% increase in our tax capacity. This year we're seeing a 3.01% increase in our tax capacity. So that means that our resources are not growing as fast as they did last year.
So in that, we're basing that on just the overall what was built within the city, correct?
Yeah.
So
it also gets into what type of growth we saw in actual existing market values too. So the growth in existing market values wasn't very robust either.
And a lot of that has to do with that we had no industrial growth at all, probably in the last couple of years, really.
Certainly on the new growth side of it, that impacted it. For the existing, not so much, but yeah, definitely on the new growth side of it. And then this gives you sort of a sense of I put this, I think it's important to understand the context of why I put this in. I put this in because I think one thing to understand is that even during times like the recession, we saw new growth happening in the community. So we've never not seen some new growth in the community. And these are even during times when we saw market values actually going negative overall. We saw new growth. And I think it's important to understand that we really need to at least make sure that we're picking up for that new growth coming in the community, because it's making sure that as that new market value is coming online, that we're bringing that into the mix so that new property in the community is contributing to the overall service levels that we provide. If we don't do that, then it ends up sort of spreading really more burden across everybody else within sort of the whole scheme of things. Local government aid, again, we are seeing officially $0 for 2021. Some of the history of this, I mean, you can see going back to 2003, we're at a little over $1 million, and that went away. We did get that back up to about $500,000 back in 2014 and 15, but then that did get cut in half. Or cut pretty significantly, created a $250,000 budget in our budget in 2018. So at that point, we did levy back half of that to try to mitigate some of the From a building permit perspective, like I said before, we've seen real steady building permit activity. We've seen less on the commercial industrial side. And what that's really had an impact on is you see really in that period from 2010, so that would have been when we saw the hospital and the data center sort of come online. Ever since then, we've seen building permit numbers really be above sort of that $800,000 per year, and a lot of times over $1 million per year. We've really, with really seeing mostly single-family residential development over the last year to two, we've really seen a good chunk of those building permits go away. As part of the 2020 budget amendment process we did back in July, we actually reduced that revenue amount by $300,000 because we realized some things were not going to be going forward because of COVID. And we've really sort of adjusted it over our 5-year period just because of the volatility of planning for these commercial industrial projects. It becomes really tough if you plan for one and then it doesn't happen. It can have a pretty dramatic impact on the revenues that we actually collect in our general. I always like to just sort of show that our population continues to climb. 2021, so we can see we're just over 27,000. These are the estimates we've done internal. I went back and I looked at the Met Council estimates, and they're pretty darn close to this. They were like 27,300. It's something like that. So we've kept pretty close to what we're projecting, but obviously this year is a census year. So we'll be getting sort of another baseline coming up, likely in 2022, of where we stand for a population. So we talk about our franchise fee or our electric fund transfer to our general fund, which represents a 10% transfer. This is one area that we've seen pretty robust growth. And really where we've seen this is we've seen both the increase that we've seen from, especially like data centers and things like that have come into the community over the past several years. But also we've seen our existing industrial park, we've seen businesses continue to expand out there. And with that, we've seen electric loads continue to increase. So this has been something that has been a positive. Like I said before, we saw some decrease in actual business activity in 2020, not a lot, but it was mostly offset by the fact that this was a really hot year. And so there was quite a bit of electric use that occurred, especially during the summer months. So some of the discussion items that we looked at in our 2 work sessions and we'll talk about tonight. You know, the first slide really talks about some of the things that really are sort of, you know, things that sort of come forward from what we talked about in our 2020 budget and things that we've planned for multiple years. So, first one's continued utilization of our tax levy policy. Again, our tax levy policy basically says that we'll limit tax levy growth to capture only new growth in the community and then any expenditure inflations. And then we only increase the levy beyond this point if a new service level or assets being added, and we'd actually add the actual cost of that new service to the actual levy that we're contemplating. The CIP program, so again, since 2017, we've funded that at $1 million. We have seen an impact on revenue loss, and we'll talk about this impact that we could have in 2021 with being able to fully implement that. As a reminder, you know, back in July, we did cut back about $275,000 of our CIP and did not get the whole thing completed this year. And then staffing study implementation and the impact of the economy on timing of implementation. So again, we implemented the staffing study last year. We first focused on our greatest need, which is our building maintenance needs, and we're able to get 3 building maintenance people funded for this last year, which that's our first 3 building maintenance people that we've had in the city. And with all the facilities that we have really become important positions. And then we're also able to sort of put in place the first 1/4 of our dollars towards actual building maintenance, which we were able to keep in the budget for this year. But there was some components of the staffing study that we did have to cut back on in July just because of revenue shortfalls. And then the other 2 that I want to talk about tonight that I think are important to talk about as we look at 2021, because they're issues that have really sort of are items that have really come up over the past year that you know, really have impacts on our budget if we want to address them. So the first one is needs identified in our recent policing review. So, you know, some of the things we'll talk about is the shortage of a sergeant position in our patrol area. And then also, you know, things that have come up through the policing review about different types of trainings that we'd like to be able to offer for our police officers, such as 40-hour de-escalation and crisis intervention training. And then also, really what we think is an issue that's becoming bigger in the community is the increased use of narcotics in the community, and really needing to re-engage with the West Metro Drug Task Force to be able to utilize regional, contribute and utilize to a regional task force in addressing these issues. And then the second one is needs identified in our recent financial rating review to really look at how we make sure that we implement a policy to increase our general fund balance. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. So from an operational tax levy policy perspective, you know, we talked about the things that impact that, so new growth, and then inflation, and then only increase in the levy beyond that if we're adding a new service. For 2020, the new growth is 1.85% with inflation running at 1.68%. So based on that policy, it would say that we'd increase our levy by 3.53%, and that by doing that, we should theoretically be able to accomplish meeting all sort of those base objectives that were already in place, not taking consideration new programs like staffing study or things like that. So if we did increase our levy at 3.53%, that would increase our tax capacity by 3.03%. So that's sort of just the baseline. The second thing to talk about is our capital improvement program. So again, we worked for 4 years to fully implement that program. So between 2014 and 2017, we implemented $250,000 each year of additional revenue into the budget to really fund $1 million gap that had been identified prior to that, to be able to reinvest back into our facilities. So this is anything from the condition of our roads to the condition of our trails, and opportunities to run around the community today. And driving down Yellow Brick Road, if you drive down that now, it has new pavement surface. If you drive down in Cortina Woods has new pavement surface. The trail behind Cub Foods, across the street from Hazeltine, used to be in terrible condition. Now it's all brand new surfaces there. So really trying to keep up with those things that are out there. One thing that has become an issue as we've looked at our 2021 budget is if we were to, because of the changes that we've seen in little growth in market value and decreases of admin fees, things like that, that if we were to fund our budget at the baseline level, that we would be short on our capital improvement program. And so what that would mean is we'd be about $300,000 short. So what that mean is we'd either have to cut out $300,000 of our capital improvements, just like we did in 2020 this year with a mid-year budget adjustment, or we'd need to find a way to levy for those additional dollars to be able to make that program whole for 2021. So that'll be one of the discussions that we talk about in this. The staffing study implementation, again, the staffing study was completed by Baker Tilly, our financial advisor, and identified a current gap of 16 employees across the city. That was approximately a $1.5 million gap, along with approximately $500,000 gap in building maintenance dollars. And so during the 2020 budget cycle, so last December or last fall, the council did decide to move forward with implementing this study, but decided to do it over a 4-year period. So what that meant is addressing $500,000 per year for 4 years, with $375,000 coming from tax levy and $125,000 coming from our enterprise funds. In our first year, we were able to fill 3 of our building maintenance positions and keep the $125,000 in to support the building maintenance activities, but we did need to delay the remainder of the program, which was approximately $100,000. Specifically, I believe it was a human resources position that we did delay as part of that. So re-implementing this plan in 2021 would require us to follow through with the second year of the plan, which we'd need to levy an additional $375,000 as part of this program. And it's really the decision about, do we think this is the right economic climate to do this, or do we think that this is something that we should be putting a hold on until the economic climate gets better? So that's another discussion item. Next one is the newly identified issues in police. So again, this came from our community conversations that we've really had over the course of the summer, starting back in late June. And then actually they're continuing with letters that we've sent out to residents asking for their input on our policing services. Really, we've been going through that whole sort of public engagement process over the course of the entire summer. The immediate issues that we've identified as part of that is, first of all, the need to have additional supervision during most of our scheduled shifts. And I'll get into more of the details so that makes sense. A need to re-engage in the West Metro Drug Task Force, and then a need to provide additional training to our officers to be able to have greater skill set towards de-escalation of situations and crisis intervention. And part of that is also giving the tools to the officers to be able to have information. So things like a vitals app. So, you know, something that provides self-reported information from individuals that may have situations that if you responded to their home, if you knew that there were certain trigger points or things that could cause issues, might change the officer's approach towards how they actually come into that situation or home. So those types of things. These are the areas that really we sort of see as areas that are growth areas and but also become really potential liabilities if we don't take proactive steps. Funding these identified needs would require an additional $100,000 in the budget. A little bit more detail on the police staffing and training. So right now, really in the staffing side of it, the biggest gap that we see, well, we see a gap in patrol. So we've been at the same levels of minimum coverage since 2001 in the community, where our minimum levels in the community are 2 officers, 1 in the north side of town and 1 in the south side of town, which is pretty thin. But what complicates it is that we also don't have supervision or a sergeant position on each of our shifts that we have out there. So direct line supervisors are really responsible for the actions of the officers, training, monitoring, addressing issues and complaints early so that they don't become a big issue, addressing use of force issues immediately, ensuring consistency, all those things that you expect a supervisor to do when they're really out in the field. Right now, we're currently able to supervise or provide supervision on 55% of our shifts. Really, at some point in time, we really should be aiming that we have supervision on 100% of our shifts. It's something we have not been able to afford to do, but by bringing 1 additional person on, we'd be up to 70% of our shifts having direct line supervision on there, which we think brings us a long way in that. The review also identified needs with training to be provided to all the sworn officers, including, you know, one that our chief feels is really important, I agree, is 40-hour crisis intervention training and other training that really sort of addresses those de-escalation tactics and less than lethal methods to deal with critical incidents. And like I mentioned before, also getting back into utilizing tools like the Vitals app that can provide us with very useful information. And then I had mentioned before, really the need that have been identified to get back involved in the West Metro Drug Task Force. This has been a growing issue within our community the past few years. And I think that probably the most concerning part of this issue is that it really appears that people are choosing to do some activity in Chaska because we don't have this participation in this task force that puts those resources in place. So it makes it easier potentially for them to get away with things in our community. In 2019, just a statistic here, 55 total narcotics investigations happened in Carver County. Chaska represented 24 of these active cases. So there is a greater need than those 24 cases we've had in the community. But these are really the only ones that the task force would address because they had a broader impact on the communities around us and not just on Chaska. So it's one of those, if we don't participate financially or if we don't participate with an officer, it's really hard to expect to get any services back from the task force to be able to address those issues. So we're we are currently one of the only cities in Carver County that does not participate, and one of the few in sort of the Southwest Metro, and even getting across the county into the river into Scott County that does not participate. Ideally, what we do is we'd have one officer that we actually put into a rotation with this task force to have them participate in it. We are not at a staffing level that we can afford to do that now and not have pretty dramatic impacts on our patrol. But what we can do as sort of a first step to get into this until we get to the right staffing levels is financially contribute. And the financial contribution to start and be a member of this is actually relatively low. It's $8,400 per year, and one that we think is a good investment for us to get back into. Next thing is our general fund balance initiative. So during the financial rating process this year, in preparation to sell bonds, Standards & Poor's, who is our rating agency, they did reaffirm our AA rating, which is great. Our AA rating we actually received back in 2006. We actually went up 2 notches in 2006 immediately to get up to that AA rating, and has had a pretty dramatic impact on the interest rates that we've been able to get. One of the things that's always been pointed out as something that S&P would like to see change with the city of Chaska is overall we have really good financial position, and a big part of that is because we have an electric utility, we have our utilities, we have things that diversify our income in the city of Chaska that a lot of cities don't have. And so, generally in the city, most of their revenue generation, their expenditures are coming through the general fund. And so, S&P or whatever rating agency they use will look at the reserves that they have in their general fund balance and say, well, we think you should have 25 or 30% reserves to be able to sort of the rainy day in case you don't get in income as expected, so that you have some reserves there. They've never been as strict with us on that because we have such a diversification of revenues. But with the COVID crisis that came this year, they started getting a lot more strict, saying, no, even though you have this diverse pool of income in the city, we want you to focus exclusively on your general fund. Your general fund needs to have a higher reserve balance than it does, because we don't want you to look at the other assets you have in the community. We want you to focus on just your general fund, because that's what, when we're doing a taxable or a tax levy supported debt issuance, they want to make sure that we have the ability to be able to fund those. So they kept our AA rating, but basically gave us a warning saying you need to address your general fund reserve balance in a meaningful way to be able to keep your rating the way it is. And that becomes a really big deal for us, because the AA rating is a really good rating for a city, especially for a growing city like ours, where we do a lot of projects, we bond for a lot of things because we are growing and have a lot of expenses out there. In the last bond sale that we saw a few weeks ago, we did a refunding issuance, and just because of our AA rating, we saw a $1.8 million savings on our debt. So having that type of rating has a huge impact on being able to save costs. So I'll talk a little bit more about some of the analysis our financial advisor did to look at, well, what happens if you don't address that? What are the actual dollars you can expect for increased costs, which makes it so what we're recommending for this year is that we address it by levying $100,000 from in the general fund, and then putting $200,000 in from our enterprise fund process to start this process. And this is something that we just have to continue. This is something that we just have to look at each year and continue to build that up. You'll see us also come back with a policy to be able to address, for instance, so like next year with our building permits, we budgeted $600,000 for building permits, but if we see larger projects go forward, like the one out at Oak Ridge Development, we could see in excess of $1 million of building permit revenue over the course of the year. Really talking about how do we take those additional revenue dollars that we get there above and beyond what we budget, and what portion of those do we put back into helping build up our general fund reserves. So those types of issues. So you'll see a policy come back this year. Some other items to consider. This is a contract year for all of our unions, but we really sort of follow with our unions and non-unions sort of the same policy. We budgeted for a 1.5% increase in wages, down from the 3% that we had shown before, really because we're just not seeing that growth in wages across the board in communities because of where we are economically. We did have the equipment replacement bonded for in 2020, which included our 21 equipment, so that's already been taken care of. We did, even if we don't go forward with the 2021 implementation of the second year of the staffing study, we kept the $125,000 of building maintenance dollars in there so we can continue to reinvest back into the buildings and really want to try to keep service levels as constant as possible in the general fund. So like I had mentioned before, if we did our base level increase, we'd still keep the same service levels, but where we'd see the gap is in a reduction in our capital improvement program by $300,000. So like the mayor said, we sort of took a different approach this year because of the just the different issues that we're seeing around revenue shortages, and really looked at different options that we could consider for this year and the financial impact that would have if we were to implement those. So option number one, I call this a base plan. So this would be if we kept our tax levy policy and we said we're only going to levy for new growth and inflation, which would be at that 3.53%. Again, historically, that should be able to cover all of our baseline services, but because we've seen revenue shortfalls in the different areas I mentioned, the impact that we'd have for 2021 if we implemented just this plan is that we would not see $300,000 of our CIP program. So we'd still, the priority we give in our CIP program is street replacement or surface replacement, and then also trail pavement replacement. So we'd still get those things done, but we'd really lose sort of those other items like park replacements, shelter replacements, those types of things. We would not implement the staffing study second year of that under this scenario, and then we also would not address any of the police or fund balance issues that were brought forward. If we did that by itself, you can see we look at a median value home in the community as sort of the comparison. So we use this as an example. I mean, obviously people's homes are valued at different values. So what the impact is on and on their valuation, but also then on how much of an increase or potential decrease that they saw in their tax market value. Our median value home in 2020 was $281,000. In 2021, that's $285,000. And so you can see the example or the taxes on this example home would go up by $1.75 per month or $21 annually to be able to fund this base level. So our percent of increase that we'd see for levy would be it'd be the 3.53%. So option number two. So option number two is, and I did put these in order, right? You'll hear me say that I actually think option number three of dealing with our general fund reserve is a lot more important than anything. But I put the CIP second because one of our objectives in our budgeting is that we fund fully fund existing programs before we fund new programs. Dealing with our general fund reserves is actually a new program. CIP is a program that's been in place since 2017. So I put it first, although I'd actually make the argument that option three, dealing with that, is probably more important. So the CIP program, again, we're short $300,000 if we go with just our base tax levy increase. So we'd need to increase our levy by $300,000 to be able to accomplish this. And if we did this, obviously we do our baseline, we get our CIP, but we would not address the staffing study implementation, nor would we address the police or fund balance issues that I discussed. And you can see on that same example home that it'd be $3.83 per month would be the increased cost that the median value home would have in the community. And then the levy would actually go up by 4.03%. Option number, I think it says 3 in there. Yep, option number 3. This is really looking at what if we address our baseline, add the $300,000 for the CIP, and then address the fund balance issue. So again, the fund balance issue, I think is, I'll show some numbers, and I know you guys have seen it, but the public hasn't seen them. To me, this is a no-brainer to deal with, because really what we're talking about is how do we keep our debt that we sell in the future as inexpensive as possible. And what we don't address in here is going to come back in the future and haunt us with potentially higher costs when we go out and we actually build new infrastructure. So you can see in this option number 3, we would fund the CIP. We would also fund the fund balance initiative for this year, which would be $100,000 being levy and $200,000 coming from the enterprise fund. The things that we would not fund under this option would be the second year of the staffing study implementation, along with not addressing the police issues that have been identified. And you can see under this scenario that for the median value home, the cost per month would go up $4.58 per month. And then the tax levy would go up 5.08%. Option number 4 is really taking those options and then looking at also addressing our police study and some of the things that came out of that. So as I mentioned before, there's a $100,000 cost in implementing that. That would be for one new officer, which would be a sergeant in patrol that would start on July 1st. So we would have that be a mid-year start. And then re-engaging in the West Metro Drug Task Force, providing additional training to officers, and also getting re-engaged in things like the Vitals app. Under this scenario, the only thing we would not fund is the staffing study and building maintenance implementation, the second year of that. And you can see that the median value home to address these issues, it'd be $5.33 per month, which would be a 6.13% tax levy increase. And then finally, the staffing study. Second year of the staffing study really would address, I think there's 4 additional positions that came in under this. One was a human resources technician, one was an economic development. I think we had another building maintenance position, and I think it was a water and sewer employee. But then also would fund an additional $125,000 that would go towards additional dollars towards our building maintenance needs. If we did this, obviously this is the last option. We would be funding everything that we're looking at as far as issues or options this year. And then here you can see on the median value home that the impact would be $8.08 per month, or a 10.23% increase. You know, some things I think are really important for us to consider as we go through this is, you know, this is a difficult year. There's no doubt that, you know, this has been a difficult one to navigate, but I think we have to really keep in mind that there are short-term things that we can do to address some of the budget shortfalls, but we also have to keep in mind that we don't fall too far behind too. You know, especially on things like our building maintenance and our capital improvement program. We have a number of city facility needs that we've been talking about for the last 2 years that are going to be coming up, such as our city hall, our MSB, our police department. You know, we completed the space needs study and we showed that to you last November. We have a lot of space needs that exist, and buildings that quite frankly are just not in very good condition that need to be addressed. We've talked about the new library. Obviously we're putting that on hold now because of where things are at in the economy, but that's something that we've talked about as a priority. And under our system, cities are responsible for the building, and then the counties are responsible for the operations. And then, you know, again, we need to be careful that we're not falling too far behind in our plans, especially with the capital improvement program, because every year that we fall behind in that, we're just pushing everything out one more year, which has a cumulative effect as we look over time. And in some cases, really impacts like on street life. You know, in order to have street life be maintained, we really need to seal coat a street every 10 years, and we need to overlay it over every 20 years. And so if we follow that schedule, a street should last 70 to 80 years. But if you don't keep up that schedule, you might miss sort of that third cycle of just maintenance activities, which are quite a bit cheaper than replacing a road, which, you know, over time costs us more money. Now, the good news is that we've always provided very good value for the dollars that are spent in Chaska. This is a list of, well, it's not a list of all the cities because I couldn't fit them on there, but it lists the rankings of 86 municipalities in the metropolitan area, and shows where, this shows what would happen if we implemented option 4. So that was the option where we re-implement or fully funded the CIP program. We addressed the fund balance reserves, and then we also addressed the police issues. So that's saying, what if we were to fund that and we looked at the tax levy from every other city from last year? So this would assume that no other city saw an increase in their taxes, and we assumed our increase going on option 4. So you can see even with that, Chaska is still in the top 10 lowest cities of tax levies per capita at $412. The thing that I think is you know, important to point out is that it doesn't really change our ranking that much from last year. If we did option 1, which is just our baseline option, we'd be in position number 80 instead of 79. So whatever option we choose, even if it was the greatest option, really still puts us within that top 10 lowest tax levy per capitas in the metro area. I throw in the surrounding cities just to give some perspective. To me, it's tough with Carver and Victoria because they're developing cities and they have to build infrastructure before development is there. And so to make that comparison, I think is a little unfair. But I do think we're a very comparable city to Chanhassen. And, you know, they have higher valuation in their community, so their tax rate is lower, but their tax levy, you know, what people actually pay is quite a bit higher. And so you can see that that's at $446 per capita, with their tax levy being about $500,000 more. Chaska's. You know, I guess one thing I'll also point out is, I mean, we've had very good value for our tax dollars in Chaska for a very long time. We've been in this ranking like this for probably the past 25 years. So we've always really provided, or for a long time, provided a really good value for services. I think it's important to point out that, you know, if our 2020 tax levy, if we use the same tax levy per capita in 2020 as Chanhassen, we could have added another $950,000 to our budget. And Chanhassen's is not high. Chanhassen isn't even at the midpoint. If we assume a 2.5% increase in Chanhassen's, which it sounds like that's what they're sort of looking at, we could add on a $1.25 million onto our tax levy, and we'd still be, you know, right there with Chanhassen, but below sort of that midpoint of cities that are out there. So the only reason I put this out there is it's hard to put in context for people when you say, well, this is what it's going to cost. But it's also, I think, important to say, well, what should it be? What sort of the typical city out there is seeing for their tax levies. I'm going to sort of skip through a couple of these and just to show some data. So on the you'll remember at the second work session, one of the things that we did is we came back and provided some data to say, well, what if we didn't address some of these issues? What would pop up as the actual issues? The general fund reserve balance was the first one we addressed. We did have our financial advisors at Baker Tilly go through and look at our prior 12 months issued of debt service, and then took that to project what we would expect to see for issuance of debt over the next 5 years, and then said over the life of that debt, what would happen if we went down one notch for our rating, and what would happen if we went down 2 notches. So you can see if we went down 1 notch, the city would go from a AA to a AA minus. Over the life of that debt, that would cost $846,900. If we went down 2 notches, which back in December of 2006, we actually went up 2 notches. So that was sort of the jump that we saw then. The increased cost of that debt over the maturity of it would be $1.8 million. So, you know, it's just important. I think it's important to see those because it really illustrates that investing in that and keeping those reserves up and keeping that rating the same or going higher is really important as we look at the costs that we have, especially being a developing community.
Pat, can you, going back to that, can you touch a little bit? You and I have talked about that, about other cities being AAA rated, but you always talked about how we probably wouldn't get too much higher because of how we do things around here.
Well, it'd be unusual for a developing city to be at a AAA, and primarily because we have so many things that we have to issue debt for. Now, some cities will choose to not issue debt, and that they'll only do things if they have cash. And you know, it's, you know, not issuing debt, it's easier to keep a higher tax or a higher rating because you're just not taking on as much risk. You know, for the city of Chaska, having a AA rating, given the amount of activity that we have, is pretty good. Because, you know, you look at the amount of activity that we have, and we're going to continue to have in Southwest Chaska as we need to put in roads and infrastructure. You know, for us to do that on a cash basis really would mean that we're taking the assets that, or the money that our current residents have been paying over the last, whatever, 20 years, and funding something that's going to impact people that are going 20 years into the future. And so, you know, it's a philosophy that we've used, that really it's those future users that should be paying for those, instead of the people that have been here in the past and had money collected and then now have that money to use, put towards something that they may not actually use. So I mean, it depends on the philosophy of the city, but it's certainly easier to keep a higher rating if you're not doing much issuance. Impacts on the not doing the CIP program. If you remember, we had Brian Jung, our public works director, in here, and it's not hard for him to talk about the importance of the capital improvement program, because he's ultimately the one that's, you know, responsible for keeping things in good shape. I already talked about our street rehab and how we really need to have a 10 and 20 year schedule for seal coating and overlay to really get the full life out of our streets. And so it's more than just having a good surface to drive on. It's also about how do you keep intact the stuff that's under the road that you don't see for as long as possible, so that you're able to do just an overlay and not have to do a full reconstruction. Trail rehab, one of the things I think that a lot of people probably do not realize, but it's a huge asset in our community, is we have 75 miles of paved trails in Chaska, which is huge. And a trail needs to be resurfaced every 20 years to stay safe. Prior to implementing our CIP program, we had enough money in our budget to be able to resurface 1 mile of trail per year. So it would have taken 75 years under that scenario to be able to replace all that. We bumped that up to 3 miles per year when we implemented the CIP program. So that's still once every 25 years. So it's not ideal, but it really improved our ability to be able to go out and keep those trails in good conditions. And like I said, I use the trails a ton, and it's very noticeable, the areas that aren't done and the ones that do get done. It's a real important thing for us to do, and it is I think sometimes sort of underappreciated. I think people very much appreciate the trails, but sort of forget that that's an amenity that not all cities have, 75 miles of paved trails. Our park and playground rehab. So the biggest issue that we have with that is both, some of our developments that are up for replacement of playground equipment, some of this equipment is 30 years old. And so it deteriorates over time and becomes a risk for us not to replace or to do substantial work in because the parts just deteriorate. But the other issue is that back when a lot of these playground systems were put in, there was no ADA laws. And so we need to be able to show that while we can't afford to go out and make every one of our parks ADA accessible all at once, we need to be able to show that we have a plan in place, that we're taking those off our list one at a time so that we stay compliant with that. We need to show that we're making progress towards that. When we don't, that's when we really open up liability issues. Our building rehab, I mean, this one I think probably goes without saying because I think all of you guys have seen some of the building conditions that we have. I mean, City Hall is a really good example. The City Hall is, it was opened in 1987. So that's 33 years ago. And so there hasn't been a ton of stuff that's been done on City Hall since it's been open. And, now things are starting to fail. So we have things like chillers or roofs or things like that really need to be taken care of. Stormwater rehab and our ravine system. So we're sort of cursed and blessed to have a ravine system here in town. It's great for sewer, to put in sewer lines. It's great for trail sections because you can have trail sections that go through wooded areas. But it does make our stormwater issues significantly more than other communities. And so being able to go out and address those issues that pop up with stormwater before they become an issue. And then we have a lot of issues like, rehab of retaining walls. I think Brian showed a picture of the one across behind Cooper's here on the clay hole that needed to get replaced this year that was completely failing. We have one down in I call it the Patrons parking lot, which is actually ours, that's failing on the west end of that. Our parking lots need to get replaced, surfaces. So there's a lot of things that our CIP program encompasses. And then the policing issues, again, this was something that Chief Seibert came last week and really sort of gave his perspective, which I thought was really good because he also comes in with a perspective from another community where there are some things they did and some things they didn't do, and he could see the benefits and things that didn't work out so good with the things that they haven't done. First of all, with the shortage on supervision, again, we only have 55% of our shifts now that are covered. This would bring it up to 70 to have one additional one. And it really, to me, this is sort of one of those that kills two birds with one stone. We have needs in patrol. So we have needs to be able to have more officers on patrol out in the field. But at the same time, we need to be able to have more direct line supervision out there so that there's somebody that is able to provide mentoring, able to deal with issues as they pop up. If somebody's stuck in the office, they can deal with those, with more of those administrative things, but they're not dealing with those issues in the field. And those things become really critical to deal with. So I thought Chief Seibert did a good job of sort of talking about what you typically see for a structure and most effective structure for police departments and why having that direct line supervision ends up really getting to a lot of those things like accountability within our police department. And then obviously he talked a lot about the training that he'd like to see each of the sworn officers go through with the 40-hour crisis intervention training, the impact of getting back involved in the West Metro Drug Task Force. So, a lot of things trying to support why, a lot of things that came up during the community conversations were really things that there are ways that we can address this. And he's really spent some time reviewing that. So as I started the presentation, I said that this is really sort of the first step in the budgeting process this year. We did have a couple of work sessions back on August 31st and September 14th where you guys had a chance to look through this. Today, because this is the last time you guys meet in September, is the day that you'd have to set the maximum tax levy for the year. And as we get into October, and November, we'll start looking at our enterprise fund budgets. We come back on December 7th for our annual Truth and Taxation hearing, and then on the 21st, we'll be considering the adoption of the 2021 budgets and establish the final tax levy. One thing, a couple things I'll point out. First of all, Nate and Kevin and I talked pretty extensively today about sort of the strategy that we're going to be using to help communicate some of this stuff out. And we're looking at doing sort of short segments, Facebook-sized segments that can go out to talk about each one of the different components that we're talking about here, so that people not only understand what's being discussed, but also the whys behind things. So we're going to be doing an interview with myself and with Brian Jung and with the chief, and really go through and help to educate people on why we're looking at these things and what the council is going to be considering, but then also talking about what does that mean for the overall impact on taxes and people's budgets. So that's going to occur. We're going to start that process this Friday. So over the next several weeks, what will happen is you'll see an interview taped on Friday, and then it'll come out on Monday. And so it's going to be Friday, Monday sort of schedule here as we go through the fall. I think we had 4 scheduled for the general fund, which will take us up to about the 3rd week in October, which is right before the Truth and Taxation statements come out. And then we'll also then be doing the enterprise fund budgets after that, which will take us up to establishing the budget in December. So that's one piece of it. The second piece is you'll see in the staff report, the recommendation I wrote was basically based on sort of listening to the conversation you guys had. The tax levy that is represented in the recommendation is assuming option 4. So that's assuming the doing the base levy, addressing general fund reserves or CIP, and then the policing issues, and talked about the discussion that you guys had, that really the policing issues are ones that you still wanted to continue to have discussions on along with the others, but really have some more focus on that. So that's what you see in the staff report. Obviously, you guys can set that at whatever amount you want to, but that's where the recommendation is. That, happy to answer any questions.
All right, questions for Matt, conversations?
We've discussed this quite a bit in the past, couple work sessions. So we asked a lot of questions of Matt and staff. So, I feel pretty comfortable with at least setting for, at least right now, going with option 4 as we kind of talk through it. I think that there's it's one of those things that I'm always reluctant to look at, tax increases whenever, we can, because, it's one of those things, it's money's tight for everybody, right? But that said, it's also important to make sure that we maintain the value of the rest of the assets. We make sure that we maintain the quality of our community. We have to keep up with things, and all these things are investments in maintaining the quality of the community and our ability to maintain it moving forward. So, it's one of those things where there's a tremendous amount of worth in what's being done as far as taxes. So, but it's also something that's necessary to be done. So that way we're not paying the price by kicking the can down the road for for future years that we'll be playing catch up later in some other way, and it'll be much more costly at a later time. So to me, I look at, all those things we discussed as investments in ensuring that the quality of services we have in Chaska, the quality of our roads, quality of our trail systems, the quality of their ability to do projects and fund projects at a best value, which is something we pride ourselves on. Those are things that we've, like in the funding part, is something we've earned that rating from Standard & Poor's over the course of years and lots of investments. So to lose that would be, tremendously detrimental to our ability to conduct projects in the future, and to be able to ensure we have a safe community. Those are, really critical things that we need to make sure we keep our eye on the ball. So with that, I'm very much, in support of, that option 4 at this point.
I agree. Sorry, I gotta go because I'm louder. Yeah, I think I agree. Some of them have real obvious financial impacts that would eventually cost our residents more. And then some don't, but I think they all really come to a point where they're really, I think, important to kind of keep moving forward with, to, again, not cost ourselves more in the future, but to also make sure we're not just talking the talk, but walking the walk, so to say, as well, with some of the objectives and things we've put into place ahead of now. So I think option 4 is the one.
I won't repeat so many of the same things on option 1, 2, and 3 that makes sense. I mean, to me, option 5 was kind of off the table for me. Just when I look at, as much as I recognize that staffing is important, we're down, 13 based on the staffing study. The current economic climate doesn't tell us that we should be staffing right now. I mean, there's a lot of people who, in organizations, who aren't able to staff and contracting to some degree. So it just doesn't seem like option 5 to add the staffing piece for me makes sense in the current climate, in the current environment, and it's not consistent to what's happening around us. So, I agree with the comments on, the option 1, 2, and 3 with the funding and the CIP. But I just want to, to me, option 5 really wasn't really on the table ever for me personally, just because I just think it's not a consistent message to tell our taxpayers when that's not what's happening outside and around us. There's not a lot of hiring. I wish there was, but there's just not a lot of hiring right now. And I think Councilmember Hatfield pointed out that when we had the opportunity to look at that plan last year, there was a 4-year plan and a 5-year plan. We elected to do the 4-year plan, and by kind of bumping it down the year, now we're just kind of changing our mind and saying we're going to do the 5-year plan. And I think that's consistent as well. And we'll see what next year brings as well. But who knows? So.
I prefer the other council members in regards to feeling comfortable going with option 4. It was difficult to kind of get there, just as some other council members had mentioned in regards to just the economic climate and some people really hurting economically and maybe others not as much, but with what is being proposed, it makes sense. Planning for the new growth and inflation, having funding with the CIP along with the general fund balance. Those are all kind of smart moves. The policing, I kind of looked at that and thought, I think that that's a great idea. It sounds like we'll be hearing more details about it, but I just, based on the community conversations and action and move the ball forward in regards to maybe making some changes or, just in the vitals apps in regards to the policing. I also appreciate the communications piece. I think that that's kind of the missing link to this now, that we're going to put this out there. And I think it's great that you guys are putting it forward to put it out to the public, so then we can hear the feedback and kind of be able to see where people are at and have those conversations. I feel like that's a great thing. So.
Matt, what was it to move for, what was option 3 per month versus option 4? I never write that down. Got that?
Or
Option 4 is 533, and I think option
458.
yeah, it's 458 per month for option 3, and it's 553 per month for option 4.
553,
Yep.
basically a dollar more.
Yeah, it's like 80 cents more, I think.
Is it 533?
Yeah.
Was it 533?
Yeah, I think it's 533. That's what I
Okay.
wrote down.
I didn't think it was a dollar either. Okay. All right. Well, I
75 cents more.
per month.
Yep.
Okay. To me, 1, 2, and 3 are a must. There's no doubt about those 3. I think that we've talked about the CIP for a long, long time, the importance of keeping, we were so far behind in street maintenance and a lot of maintenance that we're really good about building things, but not really good about up with things. And we made that determination years ago that we need to keep that, and to cut into that now would just be a setback for us as we move forward, because we're in COVID, but that doesn't change anything as far as the maintenance that we need to do. Very happy that we were able to get the 3 new building officials on, because I know that they have been a huge help in trying to get some of that maintenance that we have been lacking for years. The financial piece about getting our fund balance up to keep our ratings are huge. It's not about not being able to do projects. We would do the projects, but we would just pay a lot more to do them. And I think that that's critical, that we need to keep that. Option 4, there are some, like Councilmember McGraw talked about, adding option 5 just isn't the right message about adding staff at this point. And that is, I do have some concerns about that, but the importance of the education piece that the officers need, and entering back in with the drug task force, hearing that we are now the place to come and to deal with more drug issues. That is very concerning for me. And I know, if we put it off, that just adds another year and we can have more. And I just think that it's important that we have to get back into that. And like I said, as far as adding the officer, we're really not adding until June, so it's only a partial year. But I think the rest of it's so important that we have to have it, and we learned that. We went out and asked the community what we need, and the de-escalation training is some of the stuff that was important. And I think it's important that, we follow through what we went out and asked for it. Now we got to follow through with it. Unfortunately, everybody has to pay for it, but with everything we do nowadays, someone has to pay for it. So at that point, I can support option 4 with, like I said, I've shared my concerns about it, but I think it's important that 2 of the 3 things are very important, that we make sure that we get that taken care of as we move forward. So I don't know, anyone else have anything to add, or Matt, anything we're missing?
The only thing else I'd mention is that when we look at our comparison to other communities, and I don't know what's represented in the, whether the communities are including their EDA and their other funds in there. When we look all in. So when you're looking at that 11,413,137, that's our general fund, that's our Mount Pleasant Cemetery, that's our EDA, and then all of our tax abatement projects. So it's all in with everything. It's not just looking at our general fund. So it's, I guess, another important thing to point out that we're actually supporting more than just our general fund when we're setting that levy.
And one thing that we're fortunate to have as a utility company. And as Matt said, we had a year that was pretty warm, so a lot of air conditioning going on. 10% of those funds go in toward our general fund, so that helps offset that. So even though you're paying more money, you're paying a lot of money for electricity, but we get, we get rebated it back. Let's just call it that for.
Well, and I think the benefit we get as residents is three things: is you're paying less for your electricity than you would with Excel. You're getting more reliable service because the people who are serving you live right here in the community, can respond quick. And then we get that 10% contribution to the general fund, which keeps our taxes lower.
So, like I said, while I struggle with any increases, I know during the 2010 when I got in there, I know we talked about that, how challenging it was to do anything with taxes, and we did nothing. We stayed at zero increases. And looking back at that now, I kind of wish that we would have done at least a 1 or 2%. And I know we don't do percentages, but just for lack of a better term, to had some increases there, just to keep things. And I mean, well, part of me says it was the right thing to do because that was very, very challenging. We can't sit idly for 4 years and do nothing and not expect to pay for it somewhere down the line. So I've been through both sides of this now, and like I said, I don't like seeing raising our taxes to $5.33 a month. But learning what I've learned through this process is that I think it's important that we do make these that we have to do these 4 items to keep the city on a forward pace. So, anyone else? I'm not hearing anything with that. I'm going to throw it out then. If we are done with discussion, again, before I ask for a motion to approve, would be adopting resolution 2020-80. Just again for the public, that we've had multiple work sessions regarding the budget. It seems like that we're only spent, let me see, we've been here an hour and a half. It seems like it's like we haven't spent a lot of time when we're setting our budget, but we have spent a lot of time. Staff has put a tremendous amount of time. They've been working on it since COVID hit in June about how we're going to try to get through this. We all have concerns about what's going to happen in the 2022 budget moving forward, but we got to get through 2021 before we worry about 2022. So like I said, I just want to be clear that we've spent a lot of time about this. We've had a lot of questions, and a lot of questions have been answered. The questions that haven't been answered have been found out, and we came back and did that. This is unique this year that we were able to have the ability to pick options, and I think it was a good way this year. It gives the council more direction on what they feel is important to have done. And like I said, we had a lengthy discussion against council, and that's how we came up with choosing option 4. So I just want to be clear to everyone at home that this isn't this isn't just a quick, hastily decision, that we've had a lot of conversations regarding it. So again, if there are no comments, I would entertain a motion to approve 2020-80.
So to adopt resolution 2020-80.
Was that a motion? I'm sorry.
Yes.
Yep. So motion by Councilmember Wong. Second was that Hubbard. So I have a second by Councilmember Hubbard. Again, adopting 2020-80, which established a preliminary tax levy for taxes payable 2021. And again, this is the maximum. We can't go any higher, but it can go lower if something changes through the process. So it will not be any higher than the $533 per month on the average house. So, all right, discussion. Hearing none. Councilmember Grau.
Yes.
Councilmember Hubbard.
Yes.
Councilmember Wong.
Aye.
Councilmember Hatfield.
Yes.
Mayor Winchell, yes. Passes 5-0. All right. Thanks, everyone and staff, for all of those efforts. Always a tough year, and we're not nearly done. We got a lot left to go. So moves us to 7B, Chaska Part 30, Learning Links of Chaska. Consider approval of bids.
All right, talked so much the last hour and a half that you guys can read. No, this one's an exciting one. As a council's aware, we've been working over the past several months with local nonprofit Learning Links of Chaska, whose real mission is to be able to have golf not just be accessible for traditional golfers, but really break down barriers, both physical and economic barriers that might keep people from taking up the game of the sport of golf. So one of the things that we've been working with them on for quite some time is looking at the Par 30 golf course and looking at how we could reuse that course and eliminate physical barriers that would allow people who have physical disabilities to be able to get out and actually golf on the course, but also keep it accessible from a price point perspective for people that golf might not normally be accessible. This is really good timing for us as a city because the Par 30 is now 50 years old. And unfortunately, every bit of infrastructure that we have in there is also 50 years old. And we've been talking about this, I'm pretty sure as long as the mayor has been mayor, about how someday the irrigation system is going to fail. And when it does, we're going to have a decision to make. Well, we're lucky enough that we're making the decision. The irrigation system, it broke this summer. And so halfway through the summer, we started hand watering the course. And so the option to make a decision came at this, a good option came at the same time that we were really sort of forced to make a decision on what to do. So good timing for us, but it has been talked about for quite some time. There's actually a beyond just the deficiency of our irrigation system at the Par 30. Another issue that we have a few issues at the course. One of the issues is that we do not own our own parking at the facility. We actually lease 30 parking spots from the Goodman Group, which has the Hazelton Gates office building next door. We've done that for years and years and years, and it's $14,000 per year. So you can imagine over the course of that many years, we probably could have built our own parking lot over that amount of time. So that's something that really needs to get addressed. And then in addition with the irrigation system itself, if we were to use the same type of system that we have now, we'd also have to rehab our well house that's out there. So if you look at the costs of doing the parking, irrigation, well house rehab, soft costs, just to keep things exactly the way they are now and not really make any improvements on the course per se that people would see, it'd be about a $1.2 million cost to actually complete all of that. So we are at a point where a decision has to be made, and I'll talk a little bit about sort of the options that people have. So if you remember at previous council meetings, we did work to create this partnership with Learning Links. So it was last September that we entered into a letter of intent with the Learning Links of Chaska that developed some objectives that were common between the city and the Learning Links group. So that, making the necessary improvements into Par 30 to allow it to continue functioning as a community-owned golf course facility into the future, design the course to be barrier-free, not allowing physical or economic barriers to impede people from utilizing the asset, design the course to have a positive environmental impact, Designed the course to be economically sustainable, both from a maintenance perspective, but also diversifying potential revenue streams. So things like we don't really have the opportunity to do programs out there. This would open up some of those opportunities, and to design the course to be fun and versatile. So back in September, when we entered into that letter of intent, basically that gave Learning Links the ability to go out and do fundraising for the project. And they basically at that point in the project said, we're aiming to have $750,000 raised that we can then donate to the city of Chaska if we can meet these objectives to be able to help with these improvements. In that time period, we also started going through the design process of the course. And at the March 2nd, 2020 meeting, we did move forward to accept the concept plan for that proposed course and established a budget at $1.85 million for the entire project. And that was an all-in estimate with all soft costs and everything else. At that point, the council did authorize our engineers at Stantec, along with the golf course architect working on this, to move forward with developing the construction documents for the project to seek all the necessary permitting. So there is like Army Corps of Engineer permitting that we had to get on the course with some of the wetland complexes. And then, you know, really moving forward to get to a point where we could go out for bids on this project and get real numbers on it. At the same time, staff moved forward with completing an agreement with the Goodman Group to get parking in the project. Really, the goal was to try to get it at no cost to the project in exchange for the Goodman Group being able to use our ponding for a future project that they have planned. They actually already have approved through the city a number of years ago. And then also working with the townhome complex, so the Lake Hazeltine townhomes. To the east of there, there's a small triangle parcel that they have, which would just expand our area a little bit more to be able to really fit in the things that we felt were important to the course. Since that time, a number of things have happened. So the final design was completed, construction documents were completed, it went out for bid. The stormwater permitting process was completed. The agreements with Goodman Group and Highland Management, actually those are just getting wrapped up now. It's taken quite a while to get those in place. And then also Learning Links has been able to achieve their goal. We had asked them, if you remember back in March, to try to seek $850,000 instead of $750,000 because of increased costs. They were able to accomplish $775,000 as part of that for donations to the course. As part of that, we indicated that only 25% could be actual in-kind donations. The rest had to be cash. You'll see when I get down to the numbers that they actually, their cash contributions are more than what we required them to do. We did move forward with releasing the bids, and the contractors did come back with their bids due on August 11th. And over the last couple of weeks, we've really been working with the bids that we received to really bring them back down into a project that we felt comfortable about bringing back to the council. So the construction bid results, we did receive 4 bids from 4 different contractors on this project. You'll see the lowest bid came in from Mid-American Golf and Landscape. They're a very reputable company, done a number of golf courses across the country, some locally as well. They came in with a low bid at $1,993,902.75. And then the 3 others really were more around that $2.2 million. But the bids all came in relatively close.
There was 7 here. There were 7 bids.
There's the so some partnered up as a team together, but there was 4. Sort of wondering if you got the wrong sheet now after you had shared.
I don't know, I show 7.
Well, the lowest one was Mid-America Golf and Landscape.
And that's accurate, so.
So as I talked about in the staff report, while the bids from Mid-America did come close to the $1.85 million number, there's other things that go into that project that make up the total cost. So there was a number of things that we were actually purchasing directly to keep the costs down. Irrigation materials, the city would be purchasing because we could get those at a discount and then provide those to the developer. That's a cost of $105,000. Storm sewer materials, we're able to purchase those directly at a discount. That's $14,000. Wetland seating is something that we would do ourselves, and that's $35,000. Course seating, so the course is all going to be prepared, but our staff would actually go in and actually so there's a cost actual seed for that. And then our soft costs. So from our golf course and engineering design services all the way to construction bids. So there's an additional $745,000 on that. So really, when you added that to the base bid of Mid-America Golf, it brought it up to 2.7 million, or quite a bit over the budget amount. So we were not comfortable with those bids that came back. And so really over the last month, we've been going through a value engineering process. And so huge part of that was really our public works director, Brian Jung, and Mark Moores from our golf course staff, really sitting down and looking at what are things that we can potentially self-perform. What are those things that we can do to really reduce the cost of the project? And really the goal is to value engineer a project that really brought the cost down into something that we could feel more comfortable with. But at the same time, don't lose the objective of what we're trying to accomplish with this. Make sure that we're meeting the objectives that were set out by Learning Links in the city as part of this. And so, we went through quite a process with that to get that down. And as you'll see in the staff report, we were able to reduce the contract amount by about $250,000. We will get credit for the wetline restoration, which gives us about $36,000 additional. Learning Links agreed to contribute additional dollars towards the cost of the golf course architect. We did have to add the cost of actual materials for us to self-perform some of the work, but they're significantly cheaper than if we would have had the contractor do them. So based on the reduction, that brought the total project cost down to $2.447 million, which does still bring it about $597,000 over what we had planned for. But that's where I started getting into looking at what options do we have, and how do I think we need to be looking at this project as we're going forward. So what I did is I broke down really what I sort of see as the 3 options that we have for the Part 30 at this point. An option that we have that actually a lot of cities in the metro area have moved to with golf courses is just deciding we're not going to be in the golf course business at the Part 30 anymore, and then you close it and you sell it as an asset. There's been a number of cities in the Twin Cities metro area that have taken executive courses and done that, and your most likely buyer is a housing developer that would come and actually purchase the land for development, and that's where the city can actually avoid expenses on it, but then also get some value out of it as well. One of the challenges we have with the Par 30 golf course is it's really built on very poor soils. And that's one of the things that we're finding as we went through this is it made it expensive to deal with. If you're to play the Par 30 now, and this is something that gets improved if we go forward with the work, you'll see certain areas of the course where you'll step and there's water just coming up out of the ground. It's basically a big area that probably would most naturally be wetland in the past, but really with the development that's occurred around it has stayed dry, and obviously we've created ponds to help keep that dry. But to close down the facility and decide not to use it as a golf course, to me is not a free option like it is for a number of cities. We wouldn't be able to just close that and expect that we could go put it on the market and sell it, because there's just way too many soils correction costs that would need to happen on that site to make it worth any value. I think we'd be stretched to find somebody that could actually take that site for free and actually develop it because of the amount of soils corrections that would be there. So, if we weren't to have the par 30 there, really to me, our options would be either turn it into more of a city park facility, which has its own expenses to both maintain and also, sort of develop it into a park, or potentially be a bigger wetland area, which also has costs to be able to do that, to create it and maintain it. So I guess I put that option in there. I think we talked about this early on with the par 30, and quite frankly, I've talked about this ever since we started talking about this decision, is that nobody has really seemed too thrilled about closing the par 30 as an asset in the community, because it is something that's used by our seniors. It's used by a lot of juniors in the community. Our hope with doing this is that it's going to open it up to a broader audience of people that are going to be there. And I think there's very little value, or it is not a free option to say we close it and just have no expenses on it. We would need to do something with it if it wasn't the par 30. The second option I looked at was really saying, well, if you took option number 2 and really said, okay, we're going to just do the things that bring the course back to exactly the way it is right now. So we know we have to replace the irrigation system. That's a given. And we have a pretty good sense of what that cost would be now going through the bidding process, because we can see what the cost would be. So that's about $400,000. We know that we'd have to rehabilitate our irrigation well, which people may not see this always, but it's on the north side up by the railroad tracks. We have the irrigation well house up there that would be about $200,000 to rehab, and it would not be financially wise for us to continue to rent stalls at $14,000 a year increase. It's we've already paid more money than we would have for a parking lot, and to continue to do that would be a bad investment. In discussions with the Goodman Group, their willingness to have the parking be at no cost is contingent upon it becoming the Learning Links project, because they're also a contributor to that project. They're one of the donors on that. So that project to them is personally important to see. So we wouldn't be able to just get free parking if we went in that option. And then we also understand what the design and engineering services cost. There's some design and engineering cost services that we've already incurred going through this project, and there'd be some to actually get it ready for that process. So that's where in this option we could do that, and it would be cheaper. Instead of $2.4 million, it'd be $1.2 million to go through that option. But by doing that option, we're foregoing getting a donation from Learning Links, and I think that's the real big change in this project. We'd be doing $1.2 million alone, where in the Learning Links project, we'd be receiving a $775,000 contribution towards that project. Well, if you include that $775,000 cost or contribution towards the project, our actual city costs are $1.585 million, which is $472,000 over what just putting the course back the way it is. Which is not that it's not real money, but if you look at that over the course of the 20 years, with the financing that would go towards this, it would add approximately $28,000 to the financing. And our overall financing for the project, the debt service each year is about $107,000. So in the grand scheme of things, we know what will happen at the par 30 if we put it back the same. We can expect the same results. And, so we, I thought it was important to understand that the incremental difference between the contribution that we'd make in the Learning Links project versus the putting in the existing system back in the Par 30, there's not a large incremental gap between our contributions. In my mind, not large enough where you would put back something that isn't meeting its objective right now. I thought it was important for the council to be able to sort of understand sort of the context of what decisions we could make with that and really what the differences in costs would be for that. So in addition to considering the bid tonight, there's a number of different things that we have to consider as part of this project. One of them is the agreement with Learning Links. So we need to make sure that not only is Learning Links saying we're going to contribute, but that we actually have an agreement in place to both say what are the responsibilities of the city, but also what are the responsibilities of Learning Links under this agreement. So as I mentioned before, Learning Links would provide $775,000 towards the project. $750,000 would go towards construction, with $25,000 going towards supporting the cost of the golf course architect. And I'd mentioned before, no more than $250,000 that can come from in-kind contributions. At final tally, their final amount of in-kind contributions out of the total $775 is $102,000. So they came in quite a bit under that. To support those financial contributions, the city allows Learning Links to sell sponsorships for naming rights of different things on the course. So each hole has a named sponsor. There's the Himalayas putting green that would have a sponsor, as well as a future clubhouse. So we'd agree that there would be signage that would be allowed to be at there during the 25 years of this agreement. The golf course would be renamed the Loop at Chaska to fit with the architect's design of the Loop at Chaska. So that was an important one from the Learning Links perspective, as far as sort of reflecting what the architectural design of the course would be. That we'd agreed to allow a donor wall to be put up to recognize those people who contributed to it. And this really sort of fits in with our purpose of being this too, is that we'd agree that we design and build and maintain and operate a course that's barrier free. That we're really promoting and programming those things that really opens up golf to a wider variety of people. So I really think, with all those objectives there, I really think that really fits into something that's important. As part of the monetary agreement, we will provide Learning Links with 6,000 rounds of golf per year, priced at 75% of the market value that we set. And that would really be to go to those programs that help support either people who are, that'd go really to the programs that are trying to bring in, so it might be the Wounded Warrior Project or different types of things like that, trying to bring in those programs. And that we'd also provide 2,000 rounds per year that would be at no cost to Learning Links. And the goal of those would be to be able to get golfers, introduce golf to kids that might come from economic circumstances that golfing just might be out of their reach. Yep.
I'm just reading the way the staff report's read. Is it 6,000 rounds in addition to 2,000 at no cost?
6,000, with 2,000 of those being the free.
Okay. So it's really 4,000. So it's 4,000 rounds at 75% cost, and then 2,000 rounds.
I was just wondering if there was enough time to get all the rounds in.
Well, keep in mind, this year we actually.
Now that's straightened out.
We'd be responsible for getting the parking and then also getting that small parcel of land for Highland Management for the Himalayas putting green. And then we'd have an advisory board to basically make sure that we're objectives on the table. So that'd be made up of 3 members of the city, along with 2 members of Learning Links on that. So as part of the action tonight, if we do decide to go forward, we'd recommend that we enter into this agreement with Learning Links. There's still some detail points on all these, not real deal points, but more detail points on language we're working through with all these agreements. So if we did go forward with these, I'd recommend that the council authorize me to sign them once they're complete, as long as they stick with the terms and conditions here. If it was substantially different, obviously I'd bring it back to you, but we don't anticipate that because we're nearly completed with all these. Then second thing we'd have to consider is agreement with the Goodman Group. So again, we've been renting for several years, 30 parking stalls at a cost of $14,000 per year. And obviously-
Just want to clarify that. That's what we're paying now. We didn't start there. That has gradually gone up, and over the last few years, it's really gone up substantial.
Yep. So
It wasn't so bad when we started.
Yeah, I think it started at probably right around $10,000 per year. At least that's the lowest amount I've ever saw with it, but it's gradually increased with inflationary increases.
Then weren't they going to give it to us when they were going to do their development project? Weren't we going to get that back? Kind of the same agreement, using.
Project went through, it never got.
Right.
But really, to me, this is completing some of the stuff that was meant to be completed back when they came through with their original project. So basically the agreement that we're talking about with the Goodman Group is that they would lease 30 parking stalls to us adjacent to the Park 30. The term of the lease would run for 6.5 years, but then we'd have 9 renewal options. So the 9 renewal options would be 5 years apiece, so a total of just over 50 years.
Question on that.
Yep.
Is there a percentage that they can increase that as their cap? Like is renewal at the same cost, or is it?
No, it's not.
Renewal at a negotiated cost, and is there a cap on the?
Agreement attached there, it actually gives the schedule.
Oh, okay, sorry.
I think it's on the second or third page of the agreement, it actually gives the schedule, so it's not at the same cost, but it ends up being a moot point because basically what they say is that as long as the Par 30 runs as a barrier-free course, Goodman Group will abate the total amount of rent due each year. So that really creates the incentive for us to make sure that if we create this as a barrier-free golf, that we keep it that way. And that sort of creates the economic incentive to make sure that in the future, that we keep it as a barrier-free golf. So the only thing that we'd be responsible for is if there's any camp charges. So that might be if the pavement was being replaced in the parking lot, or restriping or seal coating, we'd have to pay our share of that. But otherwise, the entire rent would be abated during that entire time.
I didn't see what section's that in. I didn't see that.
It's the amended and reinstated lease agreement. It's like the third one down.
So the Hazeltine Gates drainage, that one, amended and restated. Okay.
So for that, we agreed to put signage in at each of those parking stalls that gives credit for the donation. We allow them to put some signage in our clubhouse for their deli that's over in the building adjacent to Par 30, which actually we do right now because it's a good place for our patrons to go over and use as it currently is. Like I said, the Goodman Group is part of the donors for the Learning Links, so they're going to end up having a sponsor sign out on the course because they actually contributed additional dollars towards the Learning Links. The city will agree to provide them with one group golfing event a year and then 25 passes that they can use for their tenants in the building to go out and use the golf course.
So those are two separate things.
Yeah, so the group would be if the Goodman group decides to have like an employee golf outing or something like that. And they've done that before where their office is right there. So Goodman Group would have the right to cancel the agreement after 25 years, but if they did that, they'd owe us $30,000 for doing that. And one of the things that we did as part of this process is to make sure that if we ever got to the point where that parking wasn't available, that we have the ability to control our own destiny. And so basically we had a parking plan put together by Stantec to show how we can replace those parking stalls if we need. Now the reality of what will happen is they put that in there because they want to be able to make sure that if they ever do some type of an addition onto their building like they had planned, that they're not running into parking issues for meeting our parking ordinances. The reality of what will happen in that process is we're going to have a seat at the table of that. We'll be able to negotiate parking standards. We'll be able to talk about different options that are there. To me, the key is we have 25 years guaranteed here of no rent and a seat at the table to make sure that in the future, as that development's happening, that we're able to be part of those discussions and know that we have an option to be able to move those parking stalls and quite frankly, use resources from that project to be able to pay for that.
This is going to be I'm sorry. I was just going to say that, I don't know, this might be a dumb question, but I'll ask it. 25 years, a lot can happen in 25 years. Many of us won't be on the council in 25 years. And that also means for them, they may have different leadership as well. I guess I'm just a little curious or uncomfortable, maybe is the word, on how we define barrier-free golf. Because in a court,
actually defined in the agreement as the plan as it was approved. So it's actually one of the attachments to the agreement is the actual plan of what's being implemented.
so there wouldn't be a question that could challenge that in the future if leadership changed and said, you know what, I'd really like to get $27,000 for rent in year 24 and year 2067, which seems like a made up year, to be honest. Okay, that makes sense. I just, like I said, when you look at the legal document, anytime things get in quotations and there's not a clear, obvious definition, but there clearly is. So that answered my question.
Basically, it's an attachment of the actual plan to it. So there is a define what that means. It's basically, this is getting at what's the intent of it. They want to make sure that it stays as that barrier free. And then as part of this agreement, then what we would do, and this is what we had always planned on doing. I know the mayor was part of this project back at that time, is allowing them to use our drainage pond for water down in there, which is, there's two things about that make sense. First of all, they were the ones that paid. Originally, it was about $175,000 that they paid to actually dredge that pond out when we did that back when they were going to go forward with the project. But there was never any agreement put in place to talk about the legal authority or right for them to be able to use that. So this is the right thing to do just from the fact that they actually made those improvements to the course. But the second part of it is our irrigation system now is based on that pond. And we really are getting away from our well house and rehabbing that. And so it behooves us to be able to have as much water flow into that pond as possible to be able to support our irrigation system if it was a really dry year. So that it makes sense for us too. So as part of this, the only thing I'll say is in this, in the draft that you have attached, it's actually drafted as a drainage agreement. In discussions with the Goodman Group on Friday, they really need to have that be an easement because they have a separate legal entity that they have, an LLC that owns the parcel that this pond would drain into, which is separate legally from the Goodman Group. Same company overall, but it's a different LLC. And so the easement will be something that's recordable against the property. And so the language will be the same, but the difference is that we'll have to survey out the drainage pipe, survey out the area that's going to encompass so that we have a legal description that we can record that again. So that's the only thing that's different from what you see attached. It'll actually be an easement agreement. And then the Lake Hazeltine Town-Owned Management land donation. This is a real bad timing issue. So we have the Hazeltine Townhome Highland Management has agreed to provide that at no cost to us. The issue that they have is that their owner just passed away a couple weeks ago, and so they can't get this transfer completed prior to us actually starting the work on the course, because we really need to start this fall if we're going to keep this schedule going. And so basically what we did to address that or mitigate that is there's not very much of the actual Himalayas course that's actually up on that triangle parcel. I'd say it's maybe 5% of the green is up on that space. There's some area that has to be graded out from there, so it impacts a little bit more. But there is the ability, if we need to, and if for some reason we couldn't get this triangle donation, there is the ability to be able to slightly shift the green over, or there's a trail that goes around the east side of it that we could eliminate that. And basically, to eliminate our financial risk in this, we've worked with the Learning Links, in particular the Moody Foundation, Family Foundation, who's making the donation to this green, that if we end up having to shrink the green, it would not be by very much, it'd just be to fit it in, we wouldn't lose their whole donation. We'd just lose a proportion of what proportion of the green actually went away, which quite frankly, we'd also see a credit on our construction agreement because we'd be building less as well. So that gave us the financial protection to feel comfortable moving forward. I don't think this is going to be an issue because Highland Management has continued to say that this is an important project for them. And this is a remnant piece of parcel that just doesn't have much value to them. But we wanted to make sure we had sort of worst case scenario in case we weren't able to get that triangle parcel donation.
That was part of the Goodman thing. He unfortunately passed away right when we were close to getting that parking lot agreement signed. Same thing happened.
Yeah. Makes you want to get things done really quick.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
They had groundbreaking. They had machinery sitting there. They were ready to go, and then it never happened. So.
So, from a staff perspective, we feel comfortable with that piece of it. Again, we've spent the last few weeks getting this down, getting the cost of this project down as far as we felt we could without impacting the intent of the project. And so I do think what's being represented in front of you tonight is really sort of our best value engineering attempt to really get these costs down while still keeping it a project that the Learning Links can be proud of and be a part of and still contribute and feel like they're meeting their goals and objectives as part of this project as well as the city. So if we do decide to go forward with this, I think it's really important that we do this soon because fall work for the dirt, the contractor, because the soils conditions are not great out there, they're going to basically go through sort of a surcharging process where they basically excavate some of the bad soils, put in new soils, and let those compact over the course of the winter so that they can come in then in the spring and grade it and be in a position where we can actually seed it as we get into the cooler months next summer. So basically the later August, early September time frame, be able to have that seed come in before it freezes up next year and then be able to open up in spring of 2022. So with that being said, staff is recommending that we move forward with this, really because as we look at this, I think this is our best option for the course. We need to do something, and I think to reinvest back into that course exactly what we have right now, we can expect to get the same results as what we have right now, which it just operationally supports itself and is not able to generate more to actually put into the maintenance of this course. I think the thing that's going to make this project a lot different is, and we talk about this with places like the community center, is it's more than just the space you create. It's also the ability to program this space and be able to have things to actually bring in groups of people and bring in programs. I think this space, and John can speak more to that as a golf pro, gives us the ability to program things and really make the Par 30 a project that really is not just small golf course that people can play on, but really is something that could be a highlight of amenities within the community. So if we do go forward, the council does go forward to accept this, we'd be taking a number of actions tonight. We'd be accepting the bid from Mid-America Golf for completion of the project. At the same time, we'd also be accepting the change order. So that'd be change order 1 to develop to reduce the overall project cost down to what we talked about before. We'd be approving the partnership agreement between Learning Links and the city of Chaska, approving the parking lease agreement for the Goodman Group project, approving the drainage easement between the Goodman Group and the city, and then approving the reimbursement resolution was already part of the consent agenda, but really basically allowing us to start expending dollars and be able to refund them through our financing, which we do at a later date. So that being said, I do know we have representatives both on Zoom and here of Learning Links along with John Kellen. Certainly would be happy to answer any questions.
Do we have anyone talked about what they're going to be charging? I know we talk a lot about that every year based on, we compare to HALA. How are we looking, and have we talked about that discussion, or has that been talked about?
Yeah, we generally talked about it. I don't know, John, if you want to address that, or if I should, from a pricing perspective per round. Yeah.
State my name or?
No, you're fine.
We, thoroughly, we haven't gone through very thorough pricing discussions, but I don't see it being much more than where our current rate is. We're in the $14 to $15 range, and we're really hoping to keep it moderately priced.
That was, we talk about it every year, how we compare up to HALA.
I think we learned a lot this summer with COVID. We kept the rate at $10 and we were very busy. So I think we proved that we can be successful with not having an outrageously high rate.
And the key to this is going to be the volume of people that we can bring through. I mean, John's exactly right. I mean, we have to keep this a reasonably course. I mean, it's still a part. I mean, it's still a 9-hole golf course. So we have to keep it our rate competitive with the other 9-hole golf courses in the area. But the difference is that we're going to be providing a much better product than what we had before, and it's going to open up to a much wider array of people who can actually use it in programming too. And so it's really, sort of saying right now we run an operation that's operationally self-sufficient. It's really saying, our increase is going to come from the increased amount of people that we can bring to the course.
And barrier-free, really, financial is a very important part of that. Just keep
Is that so? The average Par 30 golfer, are they still going to be comfortable not having traps? And I know there's not a lot of traps.
If you go in them, they're not even really traps right now. They're hard surface, like just experience.
Okay. Well, I just, I got that call and you were aware of it earlier. About
I think he's the only gentleman that's commented on that. And I think there's going to be such an improvement of the physical character of the golf course that they'll find it, more challenging in a friendly way. Yeah.
I think one of the big things you're going to see as a change is there's a lot of detail attention put to the greens. And just the way that the greens play and their shape, that's been a real focus of the design of this, is that that's where people are really going to see sort of
they're going to be bigger. They're going to have a lot of character. And they're not just going to be a boring flat green. There's going to be a lot of character that I think people will truly love.
I mean, you hear those comments more than I would. That's why I was just kind of curious about what your thoughts were and how you feel about that.
It's the one on the bunkers, but I have had a number of people being over there a lot this summer, just wondering what the price point is going to be. And I've really stressed to them that I think it's going to be real close to where we're at. Yeah.
That's good to hear. Because that's the part that, you know, really concerns me, that we outprice ourselves and it's not being utilized. And
I think that would,
people aren't afraid to drive
that,
yeah, people aren't afraid to drive somewhere to save $1 or $2.
Right.
You know, especially if the product's around, and Hull is a pretty decent place, so. Okay. Anybody, while John's up, anybody got a question for John? Save him a trip.
Well, maybe it's a John question, or maybe not. So the three options, would there be ever any interest for a private organization to take the plan that we basically have put together and say, we'll do that? We see it as a private endeavor that we could partner with it. Is that plausible? I mean, my guess is it's no, because I feel like if it was, other companies were already asked or groups would have already asked. But I'm just curious if that would ever be, like, is that a realistic fourth option where it still happens, but it's not city owned, it becomes privately owned, partnered with Learning Links?
I don't have that answer.
Yeah, my gut would say no. And the reason I'd say no is I think the thing that makes this financially work is the fact that you see a nonprofit and the city working together on this. You know, when Learning Links first started out, and this was quite a while ago, they had looked at working over on the Hazeltine, some of the Hazeltine property that's adjacent to the Hazeltine golf course. And I think my impression, and they'd know better than I would, but my impression was that the economics were much more difficult when you got into, you know, the private side of things, and that really there needed to be a partner at the table to be able to make this happen. And to me, the partnership between the city and Learning Links on this was really, it's one of those sort of perfect partnerships where they're looking to accomplish something that at the same time we're looking that we need to do something. And you're able to not have to start from scratch. You know, so, you know, if we were starting from scratch, this course would be a lot more expensive than what we're seeing here now. So I know Learning Links, somebody from Learning Links may have a better sense of that, but my gut would say is that it would be very difficult to attract a private golf course to come in. And primarily, you know, one of the additional reasons is you know, there's not a lot of golf courses being built right now. To me, this is sort of unique in the fact that it's a golf course that already exists, and we're trying to make it into something more in partnership with somebody else. You know, this would be difficult for us to accomplish if we didn't have Learning Links as a partner at the table. I mean, they're in essence contributing 1/3 of the cost to the overall project, and we can see based on the city's contribution is, you know, we're not having to contribute that much more in this scenario than we would if we just built it back up the same way we did before.
I think it's really important to know that Learning Links is not just a partner in this phase, but that we'll have a continued relationship, and they'll continue to raise money and hold fundraising events and take those funds and buy CIP things. I mean, buy things that'll be desired at the golf course.
That touches on two questions. So there is maintenance, as you know, if we do this and continue on, we have budgeted maintenance to keep it looking nice and not run into problems down the road.
That would be part of the operational budget that you see come back when we actually address that. But you know, it's where I really talk about in here is that we really sort of view two funding sources for this. One would be starting with the Par 30 itself and paying for that. But if there's any additional that. But we also, what the PAR 30 contributes, we're also going to want to balance with what our capital reinvestment needs are going to be too. We wouldn't want to drain all of our dollars out of the PAR 30 to forego capital reinvestment.
So in a continued agreement with Partnership with Learning Links, are they obligated to raise X amount of dollars over the course of the relationship that we have with them? Like beyond this initial $775, are we asking them to raise $10,000 a year or anything along those lines?
No, that's not part of this agreement. What is part of this agreement talks about the process that we'll use for the next phase for the clubhouse.
Okay.
To be able to do, really sort of put in place what we think the clubhouse should be and how they can help raise dollars for that. So to me, this is going to be an evolving partnership over time. And that's why I think having that advisory committee where we have a couple Learning Links members and 3 city members that are, continuously meeting on this is going to keep them engaged in that course. And if there ends up being needs in the future, that we would hope that they'd continue to be a partner of that.
What's like a break-even analysis as far as like rounds of golf per season?
Well, I mean, I can tell you what it is now. So a break even right now would be about 16 to 17,000 rounds per year.
And what do we cap out at there? Like what's the
32,000 rounds.
32?
Yeah.
Okay.
So if you look at that's the thing that shows some of the potential opportunity of the PAR 30 is if you look at the PAR 30, and this even occurred after 2000. Well, we opened the town course in 97.
2002 was, I think, the last year with 30,000+ rounds.
Yeah, so we had like 5 years at the PAR 30 after the town course was open where we saw about 32,000 rounds a year. Where we started to really see our rounds go down is when Hala greens opened up, and
Golf Zone or Rain, Snow, or Shine.
that's down here, which is no longer here anymore. To me, the thing that's going to be unique about this course is we're going to have a price point that's very similar from a golf perspective to a Hala, but we're going to be offering a much more unique experience for them, golfing experience for them.
Sure. I'm just curious because, I mean, with our agreement with them being that they get like 6,000 rounds of golf, with 4,000 of them being at 75% and then 2,000 being at no cost, you have to factor that into a break-even analysis to make sure that we're maintaining them.
That kind of came from, we knew that there were 15,000 rounds to work with that we could potentially gain. Yeah.
And what are we running now?
This year we're at about 20.
Just crossed 20. We're at 20,300 as of this morning. And I think last year, year before, we barely got over 14.
So the typical market cycle is that, when something's new, it'll like pull in a lot of people who want to try it, experience it. And if it's good, then they'll bring back their friends and say, hey, this is really cool. And so the first couple of years, you'll have that surge of demand. So potentially, of course, and also with the kind of resurgence of golf here, because a lot of people are kind of rediscovering the sport right now, there's some opportunity that this could draw in like a pretty high peak for at least a few years that are well in excess of that break-even point, given what we have now.
Level out.
I think the key is not only going to be individual rounds of golf, though. To me, what's going to distinguish this place is the ability to program some of this, which is, now if we have a course that is, that we can say is a barrier-free course, we can provide more opportunities to maybe, sort of like we do at the curling center, we have intro to curling that we can have intro courses that help, get people used to using a solo rider. Or those types of things, or those types of programs that have different, we might have, it might be the Miracle League. Miracle League might go beyond a baseball field or soccer field that, you'd have the opportunity to start a miracle league for. I mean, so to me, the opportunity is not just the golf rounds, because you'll have a better quality product out there, but it's the programming. And to me, that's what really makes a difference with some of the facilities, is when you're able to introduce that programming to it.
So look at the programming and look at this from the cost perspective. How do you bake in the programming as cost per hour, or make some equivalent of number of rounds against that? Because, at some point we have to recoup costs still, even with programming, right?
So I mean, typically, like when we program up in the community center, I mean, we're looking at those things. We're looking at what's the value. I mean, what's the value of renting a room in there? What's the value of our staff time that goes towards it? What are the opportunity costs that you're losing by not having rounds of golf that are occurring during there? That's stuff that we just haven't done at the Par 30 for. We've done it in our Park and Rec program forever. To me, that's going to be a distinguishing factor of what's going to really start to be different out here.
Introducing them to the facility through the programming, you hope then that they're going to be coming back on their own outside of that programming as just a regular customer at different times.
And I like that idea.
Yeah,
I think we're going to bring a different population base in.
just at a whole new demographic as well.
It's going to be, I mean, I still think our regulars will golf it, and whether they like it or dislike it, that will be determined what they think of it. But I think you're going to be bringing in different people with this programming. Now, will the city have part of the program, or Learning Links do it, or will it be a combination?
I mean, it's all going to be operated by the city. But one of the things we want to, with like the Learning Links Advisory Board, is what are some of the things that we both agree as partners are good programs to bring in to really introduce that barrier-free golf. That's why I think having that advisory group really sort of keeps us both on task and with objectives to make sure that, we both feel like we're doing what we should to be able to maximize the use of that course.
I wanted to touch on Councilmember McGraw's question about the private partnership. I don't know that you could switch this over to a private partnership, because all of these partnerships that make this happen would probably be null and void. So you'd have to start and renegotiate everything. So that would make it very challenging for everyone involved with it, because then, that could, I don't know if that would void the parking contract, for instance, if we weren't part of it. And then all of a sudden now you're adding a $15,000 a year expense on it you didn't plan on. And so the fact that we're this far, I don't see it going anywhere backwards without it really collapsing. I mean, that's my personal.
I mean, certainly if there was a private group coming in, we wouldn't be paying for anything going towards it, because it would be a private group coming in. I mean, I really think that we'd need to do something at the Par 30, but we wouldn't be talking about this project if it wasn't for Learning Links, and Learning Links wouldn't be able to accomplish this project without us. And so to me, that's what makes this really sort of unique is we both need each other. We can't accomplish this level of what we're going to financially without having them. And they could never, because we know exactly what the costs of it are. It's, $2.4 million. They could never raise enough of those dollars to be able to do it by themselves. So to me, this is a perfect partnership, because we both need each other and we both have the same objectives here.
Question in regards to that partnership. So originally it was kind of a 50-50 financial deal, right? So obviously costs have changed. Are we asking for them to continue?
Well, that's put back in March when we got that project budget of 1.8. At that point in time, it was pretty clear that 50-50 was not going to be able to be the split. So they did try to, and they actually did get more. So they got, we had asked them to try to get $850,000. They were able to get $775,000. One thing I give them a ton of credit for is this is not an easy climate. to go out and do this. And one of the things that really, I think, added a challenge for them is, you know, they went out and had a lot of these partnerships and agreements in place prior to COVID, but then they really needed to go back out and sort of make sure that those partnerships were still going to be there afterwards. And so to me, that really shows the passion of the people who are donating to this project, that they really feel it's really important to complete from their mission side.
I think that's what makes this so special is, yeah, the financial pieces are really important to think about, but I think this is bigger than that, and that, people aren't gonna just be like, oh, it's another 9-hole golf course I can go to. It's more of a destination, and that definitely plays into it, as well as, I think more and more person-centered thinking is really important, and that's big in the disability community. And this really plays into that, and being able to have access to golf for some people is something they maybe never had before and will with this. And I think that is just really the spirit of Chaska to me, is that this is very much the spirit of Chaska. And that's what I love about it. And I think the financial pieces are really important, but I think, does this help continue our mission to be the best small town in Minnesota, best small town in Chaska, best small town in Minnesota? And I think it does. I think that's an important piece to think about as well.
Well, and I mean, obviously the Learning Links say better than I can, but I don't think it was lost on their donors that Chaska is also engaged in a process with the Rotary to make a Miracle League field up in Southwest Chaska, and that we've added adaptive programming at our Chaska Community Center with doing both Miracle League programs and also just open gym, adaptive open gym, which didn't exist before. So I don't think it's lost on the donors that this isn't sort of a one and done sort of thing for us. So we've really been engaged on these partnerships for a few years now, trying to bring these projects to fruition. The Miracle League field will happen. I mean, because we have the land, the Rotary has dollars to put into it. It's just a matter of the timing of when it'll happen. But I mean, now you have two really spectacular facilities that are, really geared towards our community with disabilities, and also programming that goes along with that at the community center to really look at more than just the majority of people and the folks in the community who we serve. That really, it's how do we serve everybody in the community.
I just want to make sure that it's clear that I am a huge fan of this, as someone that is scared of the regular golf courses, as I've very much communicated with you, John.
Drivers, I heard, yeah. Mm-hmm.
I see lots of awesome opportunities. I think it's a great partnership. I only ask the hard financial questions because it's an increased cost, and because of some of the agreements with the rounds of golf at a discounted rate, dealing with the Goodman Group. I just want to make sure that financially, that this, not only that, yes, it will do great in the first 5 or so years, but I want to make sure it does great, past 5 years, and that we're making, improvements, and that we're taking care of this for years to come, so that it's a good investment just all the way around. So I don't want it to be thought that I'm asking these hard financial questions because I'm not a fan. I very much am.
These are the questions to ask, and that's why I think it was really important to, at this point in the game, is just remember what options we really do have.
Yeah. I just want to make sure that, not to say that you haven't done your due diligence. Just
Remember, we're gonna have if it moves forward, the huge Himalaya green, which will be no charge. That'll just be like a city park where anybody from anywhere can come and use that at no charge at any time.
And keep in mind that the Himalaya green is 18 holes. And so, if somebody wanted to with their family, they could come up and that'd be a mini golf game for them. So, I mean, that's something free that people can come up and use. I don't know, golf better than I do, but they hit
part about the project, actually.
concept is
Yeah. Yep.
which, in Scotland, golf is more of a community sort of thing. And, their golf courses like St. Andrews on Sundays become picnic grounds. And so, this is an opportunity for people who don't even, you could take your, 3-year-old or 4-year-old out here and play 18 holes in the Himalayas course as, like a, just having fun as a game there and not even go out and use the course. So to me, it's going to be an asset to the rest of the community too. That quite frankly, if you don't golf and go out and play 9 holes, you don't have that opportunity there now.
I would be a little more nervous if this was the 18-hole course, because John will attest to this, rounds are going down. People just don't have the time to play 18 holes. I mean, not this year.
In general,
But I mean, in general, around golf is kind of slipping because it's a large time factor. And now you can go play 9 holes in probably an hour and a half and be able to go home and you got your golf fix and not near the time commitment for it. So
I just talked about that. It's a 5-hour commitment to play 18 holes.
Yep.
Yeah.
And here, I mean, people are getting a quality experience in an hour and a half.
Well, 3 hours for me though.
you play that in 3 hours, you'll be getting a lot of people upset. Get going. Where's the Ranger?
I appreciate the conversation. Like I said, I have good questions from the council because, I mean, anytime you see dollars come in higher than you expected, it's a moment to pause. And, and on top of the fact that we're making tough budget choices and money choices every day now, right, with the current climate. So it's good conversation. To me, I do appreciate the staff putting together the scenarios because I do think it's easy to, for someone who hasn't heard or listened to say, well, sell it for houses, right? Well, here's why that's not really the option, right? So I think it's just good to continue to rehash and have that conversation. I think it's also a fair acknowledgement that if the sprinkler system wouldn't have not failed, if we would have duct taped it a little longer, maybe we have a different, we could have delayed it or, done something different with the cost, but I don't think we probably want to continue hand watering it for another whole season. So that's a reality that, shoulda, woulda, coulda, would have been nice to get longer, but can't fix that now too. So like I said, I think I've been always excited about it. The more and more I've learned about it, I like the partnership between the two. I asked the question about is option 4 and option 4, just because, like I said, I want to make people to realize that we did try to look 360 around this whole thing to see what our options are. And we're not just moving forward because it's a shiny, exciting project. So I just, like I said, I think it's good. I've enjoyed the conversation, and I, again, appreciate kind of the laying out the facts of the options as clear as you did.
To me, what's most important to understand for people is the do nothing option isn't free.
Yeah, correct.
I mean, that's,
Yep.
to me, I think that's really important for people to understand that, in Mendota Heights, I was friends with the city administrator over there back when they were talking about selling their course. And that was an easy one for them because it was like at the intersection of 2 major roads and it was a nice flat piece of parcel. And you look at it, you're like, oh, this is no brainer. This is a housing development. And so it was an easy decision for them to do that. This is not an easy parcel. This was a remnant of Hazeltine. And, it's been an asset to us. And I think the other thing we have to remember is we haven't put a lot of money into this over the last 50 years. And so it's served us very well.
I was going to say, going off, I agree with John. I think these are good conversations. But there was nothing, we have squeezed every ounce of what was valued to that course out of it. I mean, it's needed work, and that irrigation has been duct taped for the last 10 years that I know of. And like I said, we knew when it's just everything's so obsolete in it. So, and I think the other point I want to make here is that even though this will be something new, this is rebuilding an asset that we already have in place. And it's been a very strong, I mean, like you said, back when it was doing 30,000 rounds a year, that's that recreation piece that people want to come to Chaska, or why they come here and stay here.
15,000. lot of people that are served.
Right. And, you know, even seeing the increase this year, there's probably a lot of people out there that's never played it before, just because of all the new people that have moved to town. And I just, so I think one, you get people, now they probably just got used to it. Now the Dargon City's gonna shut it down for a year and a half, so that'll make it a challenge, but you know, I'm kind of excited to see it. You know, everything you see on paper, you don't know till you see it in real life, but it'll be exciting to see. And maybe it's not the best timing right now with what's going on in the world, but it's just, we've been working on this for a number of years and everything lined up to now.
I think it's important that a third of the project is being paid for by
Yes.
someone else, and those dollars are tied to getting it done. So,
Well, this project checks so many of those boxes, right? It's the community, you know, it's the, you know, public-private partnership. It's something that adds value to the community. It's reinvesting in something we currently own. It's aligns with our values as a community in terms of inclusivity of whether it's income barriers to making part of it free to, I mean, keeping it at low cost for anyone from the public, as well as including different, you know, groups who have different accessibility challenges. Creating something as unique that is as a destination for us. It's, you know, it's creating something that's going to be lower cost to maintain over time. There's so many of these boxes that are checked through this. The only box it doesn't check is the, you know, pandemic box. It's like in the middle of all this, but outside of that, which we had no control over, I mean, this is something that it really speaks to us as a community and really adding something that's of tremendous value to our community. You know, because, you know, so in theory, if you gave it, like you said, if you gave it away and someone built homes on it, there's just no value except for the people who own homes there. We have maybe an incrementally higher tax base, but what value does it add? Because now you've lost an amenity that, you know, was there that people could take advantage of, that the public could use. So, you know, this is really, you know, revitalizing something that's been in need of it. You know, as the mayor mentioned, you know, we've kind of squeezed like every ounce of every cent of value out of this over the past 50 years. So at some point it comes time you have to, you know, just look at this and say, it's time to reinvest in this. And thank goodness that there was a partner here who's willing and ready to, you know, to help like spring for part of this, make it really something special.
Yep. All right, anything else from anyone? All right, thanks, John. Appreciate it. Do we have to make all these different thing, or is it one motion covers them all?
one motion can cover them all, but I would list out specifically that, so in the action,
It's 5 items.
5 items.
Construction contract with Mid-American Golf accepting base bid. Change order number 1 with Mid-America Golf reducing construction scope of project. Partnership between Learning Links and the City of Chaska. Amendment to parking lease agreement between the City of Chaska Goodman Group, and approval of drainage easement agreement with the Goodman Group and the city.
And with those that you guys are authorizing me to sign, because there are some, we've been rushing to get these done, so there are some detail stuff and documents that need to be done.
What do I need to add?
The first is authorizing me to execute those documents on behalf of the city. So
That's yep. Okay, I missed that. Yep.
Only thing, yep, we do have a representative of Learning Links here. I don't know if they want to say anything or not, but
I'll leave that to you. Hi.
Hi, thank you, Mayor. Thank you, council members.
You have to really use your outside voice because it's hard to hear in here.
I'll project. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, council members. On behalf of the Board of Learning Links, we are so thankful for your enthusiasm. It's wonderful to hear our mission echoed through your voices and in your own ways. We feel so fortunate to have found a match in the community in Chaska. And I really can't let this moment go. Matt, your organization, your decision-making, the way that you bring the right people to the table at the right time has guided this process and helped us make really good decisions. So I really want to thank you. Yeah, it's been over 6 years since the original founders of this board started work on this. And we're very excited. I can't overstate that. So we will welcome you all to come and play, and also to a groundbreaking, which we hope to schedule sometime soon. Thank you.
Awesome.
Thanks.
Thanks. Appreciate that. So Matt, just one quick question that I have in regarding the change order 1. When it says a 8x16 prefabricated shade structure, is that the clubhouse?
No,
$16,000.
that's on,
It's been reduced to, well, it's gone. I still don't understand.
it was something out on the course.
So it's a storm shelter, basically?
Yeah, I mean, it was sort of like that one that's out at T-Box, is that 7?
Up there on the,
On the far back hill.
yeah.
Yeah, it didn't seem necessary.
So that's just taken out, is that?
That's
So,
things we,
so all of these things in this change order 1 have either been removed or we're buying it at a better rate and giving it to them?
no, so in the change order, another ones are either taken out, or we've decided to self-perform them. And so that's why we have the addition, where I said we needed to be able to consider $46,000 a cost for the public works. That's going to be their cost of supplies to be able to self-perform a lot of the work that's being taken out of there.
All right, so,
And by the way, huge kudos to our public works staff and our golf course staff. I'll tell you what, we've talked about this before, and I sort of consider this the Chaska way. Our public works crew, I don't think people fully recognize how many parks in the community that they've designed and self-built themselves, where most communities are going out and contracting all that out. Those guys are a group of people with some serious skill sets that really like to be able to have that type of impact on the community. So a huge kudos to them and to Brian Jung in particular, but for his work in helping with value engineering. So that was a huge benefit to us.
awesome. So again, going back, I gotta go to the original document here. So I just want everyone to be clear. Hang on, gotta get there. So we are authorizing the city administrator to execute these documents on behalf of the city: construction contract with Mid-America Golf, change order 1 with Mid-America Golf, partnership between Learning Links City of Chaska, amendment parking lease with City of Chaska Goodman, and approval of drainage easement agreement between Goodman and city. Correct? Okay, so that's what we would be making a motion on. So if there are no further discussion, I would entertain a motion whatever direction we want to go.
I make a motion to.
I'll second.
Okay, so I have a motion by Councilmember Hubbard, second by Councilmember Wong, and I assume that you are approving that, correct? Okay. Again, approving the 6 items that I've listed and read twice, so I'm not going to read a third time. So, all right, discussion. Hearing none. Councilmember Hubbard.
Aye.
Councilmember Wong.
Aye.
Councilmember Hatfield.
Yes.
Councilmember Gra.
Aye.
And Winchell, yes. Passes 5-0. So, all right, that moves on. Thanks everyone for that was online, and thank you for being here. John, thank you. All right, we move on to item 8, bills. Anyone have anything on bills?
5-minute break real quick.
We're gonna do a 5-minute break. 4 minutes you got. Tough ship here.
Okay.
We're back. All right, thank you for that. We've been sitting here for a while, so. All right, so I will go back to item number 8, which is bills. Anyone have a question on bills?
Yes. You guys are being blown away because I only have 2 questions tonight.
What?
I must have a fever or something. Only 2.
Now I need a recess.
Okay, so first question is on page 5 for Egan. Egan Company, there's damaged walls on Highway 61. What was that from, or what happened?
A car running into walls.
Ah,
Yep.
awesome.
We get that back via insurance, right?
Yep.
Okay. So we pay for it and then get reimbursed for the expenses later, right?
If it's under the deductible, we still have to meet our deductible, but it gets counted towards our deductible.
Fun, good times. So page 11, the only item is the state of Minnesota. It was a second quarter indirect. Is it indirect assets or what was that?
Correct assessment. So what they do is they estimate the, so for our conservation improvement program. So it's the Department of Commerce that actually regulates that for us. And so they have to determine not only that we reduce our electricity by 1.5% each year, but that we also spend 1.5% to accomplish that. And so they have each community or each utility has to go through that, the administrative costs that the state has of monitoring that.
So it's sort of like an audit against the savings to say that you're really meeting the goals of the program.
Yeah. So it's basically their cost to make sure we're doing it.
Okay, that's all I got. Thank you.
That's it?
Yep.
Oh. I got one, Matt. It's on the top of page 15, the Salvation Army August heat share contribution. What is that one about?
Yeah, so we make a contribution towards the heat share program. We've done it for years. A lot of utilities do that just to help with bills for people during the winter time.
Right. So then the other question I got is how do we pay, like when we have the 212 interchange? Like I see we got another, is it $1 million? Yeah, $1 million bill to the contractor. Do we pay those is it by percentage of project done? Is that, how do we pay that? How do we do that?
Yeah, so it's 5%. Yeah, they basically, you pay by what whatever percentage the project is.
Because it just, I guess I look at it like right now, I mean, there's only a few little things left up there for Henches, and I think they're just waiting for some fencing along that, where they put those retaining walls up.
Yeah, but the other thing to keep in mind is that we also withhold retainage. So, we'll hold that until I think typically a year after the project is done to make sure that there's no warranty issues or things like that.
Okay. I was just curious. I just saw that. I was just kind of wanted to know. All right. Anyone else with any bills?
I have two. Page 8 for life core biomedical, the overbilled tax refund. There's like 3 of them. Well, it's page 8. It's at the bottom, but then it kind of goes into page 9 as well. But,
Well, it's Life Core Biomedical.
oh,
There's 3 of them in a row that they were overpaid tax refund, overbilled tax refund.
curious. That? It's just that. Just that? Okay. All right.
For you.
There you go. And then going back up to page, I think 1 or 2.
What page?
Hold on, I gotta find it. 1. Associated mechanical contractors. So there's a repair at Crooked Pint. Is that something that like, because I know they lease or whatever.
Yeah, it depends on whether it's a permanent fixture or whether it's a tenant improvement. If it's a permanent fixture, we're responsible for it. If it's tenant improvement, they are.
I have a question on page 10, document, for minutes.
I think that Councilmember Wong decided that he was just going to ask 2 questions. He sent the rest of his questions to you guys.
No, it's a big game. We just try to stump you, Matt.
This is actually a different one that I had marked, but whichever. The Minnesota Department of Employment for the Forma Code LLC loan repayment. I don't understand that. We're like repaying them.
We're a pass-through. They received a grant through us. And so basically we end up being sort of the conduit for it.
Got it. That makes sense. Thank you.
All right, anybody else? What's that?
Email was the question.
Hearing none, I would entertain a motion to pay the bills. Motion by Councilmember Wong,
Second.
second by Councilmember Grau to pay the bills. Discussion. Hearing none. Councilmember Wong.
Aye.
Councilmember Hatfield.
Yes.
Councilmember Grau.
Yes.
Member Hubbard.
Yes.
Mayor Winchell, yes. Passes 5-0. All right, moves us to 9, other business. Councilmember Grau.
Yeah, not too much since we had just a week ago, but actually at 5 today, we didn't have a work session, but I kind of had a work session because the Eastern, it's such a long, Eastern County Education Advisory Committee is the committee that I sit on as a city council rep, had a Zoom meeting for the month of September. Spent a lot of time talking a little bit about school opening and some of the feedback regarding that. And then, just a conversation about the budget having to be completely amended in next month's meeting, just because of everything with COVID. They are starting similar to what we're doing with our programming and trying to start scheduling pods and socially distanced activities and kind of utilizing large spaces. They're doing that as well. But the thing that I thought I'd bring back just to share that I found interesting because I participate in it is some club care numbers. So after school care, before school care, which is one of their largest programs, so this year across the Eastern Carver County, 453 students are participating either before or after or both for care for school. That is down from a typical year, but they're pretty happy with that just because of the uncertainty. With parents, I can point to a neighbor in my neighborhood, for example, who made the decision not to sign up for club care this time because they're both working from home. So just come on the bus and, we'll entertain you until the workday is almost done, right? So they're still pretty happy with that. And then right now they have 176 on the Wednesdays all day across the district, 176 students. The one note I thought that was interesting in that, and I can, as a parent, experience it and ask that question, is that they are working with education in the school system to try to equip the club care leaders, workers, don't know the term to use there, to help students do their distance learning, because that's a new challenge because they might be at club care on Wednesday, but they still have assignments to do. And there's a general expectation that when my child, I'll use myself example, when my child comes home, did he get his work done? Now it's my child's responsibility ultimately, and me as a parent ultimately, but at least providing those resources and help and time set aside so that they can get that completed on those Wednesdays. Other information, data points that I thought was interesting, they do have 91 tier 1 parents. So those individuals get the care during the school hours on that Wednesday. The biggest feedback that they struggled with and there was a little confusion and maybe some upset families or confused families is that the governor did change from spring to fall the definition of what tier 1 meant, with the largest change being that both parents have to be tier 1 versus one parent to be eligible for that. So just a reminder, tier 1 basically is basically free care for those employees during that Wednesday. So to receive free care now, if they're not tier 1, they can do the regular club care and pay that fee. But they thought that was it was a good improvement in general, but it did impact because people had confusion of like, well, I was eligible for in the spring, why am I not eligible in the fall for the tier 1 piece too? So I think in general the feedback is that the school year they're excited where it's at. I think there's some optimism as Eastern Carver County's per 10,000 number has declined the last 2 weeks. However, I think there's also some concern because that's not the state trend. The state trend is going the other direction. So either we put a bubble on Eastern Carver County and we're doing really good with that, or the numbers will regress, everything like that. And then I think the other big concern is that looking for ways to connect with adults that don't maybe have the connection to a child or parents, that piece, or maybe don't have the connection to use technology. A good example is instead of getting a book in the mail with all your options for community recreation, they basically sent out a postcard that said, go online and check it out. One, it's cheaper as they're looking at their budgetary purses, but two, it's hard to print something because it might change next week. And so that was kind of the reality. However, now, if you're not someone who has access to internet, a computer, everything like that, that card did you no good. You weren't able to look through it. So I think they're working with the staff there to try to figure out how do we connect to people who may don't have access to technology, maybe don't have that comfort technology. If it's like, I was thinking about it on the call, like how do you teach a class about Zoom using Zoom, right? If they're not comfortable operating to begin with and the whole purpose of the class, but they're doing some things like that, trying to get people comfortable, understand that technology. One of the more popular one is actually just some technology of like how to use an iPad, how to use a cell phone. Just because in COVID, her expression was individuals that may have less comfort have been gifted technology from family members to try to stay in touch with them, like face chat time, but they don't have the comfort or the skill or knowledge to actually use it. And that's frustrating as a challenge because, here's a great idea. I got you this so you can stay in touch with us, but now it adds the stress of how do I actually work it. So, just wanted to share kind of some of the feedback from that, but appreciated, personally appreciate the communication that the school and the community rec has provided when it comes to collecting the care for after school and before care for kids.
Right, you're good?
Yep.
Thank you. Councilmember Hatfield.
Not a whole lot, just that early voting has started. So that would be a more comfortable way to vote for you. Definitely go do that. And then another thing I just wanted to comment on, how I feel like everywhere I go in Chaska has just been really respectful with the mask mandate and everything. And I just have been so impressed with our businesses and all the precautions that everyone's taking just to keep our community safe. I noticed that over the last week, I'd go into different places and I've started venturing out a little bit more, and I just think Chaska's doing a really good job. So I just wanted to comment on that, and that's all I had.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Hubbard. Fooling.
I thought you were gonna go the other side over there.
No, I'm fooling you.
Not very much. I met with Marshall, just talking over the community center today. So I got a chance to, hadn't really been in there since March. And so it was really great to see some of the improvements that we have been talking about here, in person. So if any time to pop in and just look around, obviously give a heads up because it's a COVID. But no, it was great. And then he reminded me that there is an event. You have to register for it, but it's Cycle Chaska. It's this Saturday. It's at 11. There's a couple of options. It's bike riding. One of them is you start at Lions and go to Athletic, and then option 2 is you do the mountain biking, the Hawks Ridge, and then option 3 is a 20-mile bike ride with some of the leaders. So 3 great options depending on your willingness to exercise on Saturday. So thought I'd put that out there. And then also just a tap on, or feather in Chaska's cap. My son plays soccer at the field across from us over at Sunset Park. And I was talking to a lady, another mom, and she was saying that she was from Chanhassen, and she says, we always come over here for Parks and Rec because you guys have the programming, and Chanhassen doesn't. Sorry, not to throw shade at Chanhassen, but we have the programming. So.
All right, thanks. Councilmember Wong.
Okay, so let's see, a couple of reminders. So Launch Ministry has an online fundraiser this Wednesday, that's the day after tomorrow, from 7 to 8 p.m. My Health has a Mirror Ball virtual fundraiser on October 7th. So that's myhealthmn.org. In addition to that, the schools are going to be shifting to, or at least, sorry, Chaska High School is shifting to the hybrid model as of the 28th. So, I'm sure that all the parents and students who have students there are, aware of that, as I have a student at Chaska High School. And so, so there may be, people may not necessarily be aware of it, but that's definitely happening. So expect more kids to be going back to the campus very soon. In addition to that, there's also there's a food distribution event that happened last Wednesday that was at the Old Gedney Pickle Factory, and that was it was a very, very busy event as well. According to the numbers they collected, they served all the volunteers and organizers. They served 520 families with a total of 1,943 people. That included 760 children, about 1,069 adults, and 114 seniors. So that was who was provided with food. And from at one point, it sounded, they said that the line of cars went back, past Stoughton, back to the main road, I guess by Engler or something like that. So the line of cars was just incredibly long. So
Did they run out of food?
no, they did not. We had just enough for everyone who was there. Still had some boxes of chicken and squash if anyone was interested in apples. So, but yes, we had just enough to get food for everyone that was there. And so there will be another event that will be happening on Saturday, October 10th, also at the same location from 10:30 till noon. So this is also open they're still looking for volunteers. I know this last time they were kind of shorthanded, and last couple of times actually was shorthanded. So certainly if anyone's interested in volunteering, they're always looking for people who are willing to lend a hand. Please get the word out, because they could always use help with that. And it's great to be able to see the people that you're actually helping, because it's something you're not often able to do in a lot of cases. Last item here, I think Taylor. Yes. So Councilmember Hubbard and I are going to be hosting just a sort of an informal sort of forum. I think the date we've picked is Sunday, October 4th at City Square Park. We'll meet in the gazebo. And so anyone who wants to show up, feel free to come, and we'll be there to answer questions, just have a kind of informal chit chat. So for anyone who wants to know more about, what's going on, or just to, know, or just to have questions, or just want to share something, zero thoughts or opinions. Anything you want to add to that?
I'm excited and looking forward to hopefully having some nice conversations with other Chaska residents. We'll get some information out on the interwebs. We just literally picked the date today, like before the meeting started. So that's why he's like, you want to do this? That's why. A little cloak and dagger there.
It's more of the spur of the moment.
Yeah, that would be a great opportunity. And we wanted to do it before it started to get really cold and kind of just engage with some of the community members.
Yep. That's all I got.
All right, thanks. Kevin. Thanks for keeping us on track here and trying to get these mics working. One of these days we'll get them right.
One of these days we will. Work on once.
Maybe we all need to get purple and white ones. What do you got? White? Purple and white, maybe. Chaska colors.
Yes.
Luke, anything? You got anything, Luke?
I just said the meeting after we COVID-19 have a COVID-19 vaccine, that's when all the things are going to be working perfectly. We can go back up. No, I have nothing.
All right, thanks. Pat, you talked out?
You know what?
All right, just a couple real quick things. So generally every year, transportation, we have a fly-in, Washington, different people go. This year it's virtual. That's going to be this week. Now they moved it to September. So that'll be interesting to see how that works out for us. I was invited to groundbreaking at Westbrook Church. It's not in our city, but it's across the street, right out at 10 and 11. They are going to be building the church there, so if anyone's wondering what's going to happen there, sounds like very soon they're going to break ground. I mean, well, that was groundbreaking, but I mean, they're actually going to break ground and move forward. So one thing I'd like for us to, I don't know how we would do this, but I know as we move forward and they're moving dirt like crazy at the Hammers addition, and we're going to do different things, but I would like us to see whether it's the developer, which I think it should be, is that anytime that they dead end the street, that they put a sign, put the barricades and a sign up that said this street will continue. Is there a way that we can just automatically do that? Because we have a lot of streets in that, in Southwest Chaska, in that development closest to 212. There's 2 or 3 streets that there's not a lot of building there yet, but I just like, I don't want to put future councils through what we're going through on some of these streets, that they're in there before they build.
That sign up.
Huh?
Remember, we put that sign up.
I know, but we were maybe 6 months late on that one. But at least then it's there. And like I said, I don't want to see future councils that have to go through what we're going through, but if that's something that we can work in, I would certainly like to see that done. And I know Kuzma's actually got a couple of ideas on signs that he's seen about those that we can just post there. And I was somewhere this weekend and I just happened to see that. And I went, there's one of them signs about that, where there's a dead end area. It says that this area will be slated for development in the future.
Tennis actually has pretty nice signs.
Okay, but I just like to see it, that we actually put it in there and it's something we don't forget about. Couple events that we haven't talked about in a long time that are happening. Guardian Angels is gonna have a car show Saturday. That is this week, right? I think so. And they're gonna have a little luncheon. I don't know, they're gonna serve burgers and stuff. And then Schramm has a large Oktoberfest, but I think you have to buy tickets and you might have missed them. I think that ship might have sailed because I think they're sold out, but I don't know. But just know that those couple events will be going on. October, we go back to regular council meetings again, October 5th and 19th. And for council, I believe we have work sessions at both. So just know that that is coming. And we have an EDA meeting, just basically very short. We just have to approve the budget for the EDA. So it'll be a short meeting. So if no one has anything else, I would entertain a motion to
I have one
adjourn.
question, because you said sign and made me think of it, and I should know the answer to this, but I don't, so I'm gonna ask it. I noticed a new sign on Big Woods Boulevard, a nice blue sign that says Carver County Sales Tax Dollar Project. Is that the road or is it the plan? Like what is that, and is it new today?
I'm gonna say, how about those twins?
I'm gonna get asked that because I was curious what that was. Do we know anything?
Road, we paid for 50% of it, but
That's kind of why I was like, well, that seems very strange to go there, but it's kind of by like the wetland area. So I'm like,
No,
It's the road.
We should go tape a sign to it.
Yeah,
We'll color something real nice.
I will not.
And
If anyone in my neighborhood chooses to do that, I won't know anything. But
I think there's one up at Lyman too, with the new project up there.
And
I think it's anyone that's had the sales tax funding going with it.
how long is that sign there for? It's stuck out. I'll just say it that way. I was like, is that new?
Yeah.
Speaking of Lyman, there's gonna be groundbreaking October 5th,
the Tuesday, the 6th, I think.
October 6th. I don't know if the rest of October 6th. So, council, you'll get an invite to that. It's from 11 to 12. I'm not sure where it's taking place, so.
They label it wrong with that pump station on Lyman. Whatever our pump house, that's right there on Lyman.
I thought you meant the
gas station. No.
On the east side. Okay. Okay, so, yeah. So that'll be happening. All right, again, I'll go back to, anybody else? Motion to adjourn? Motion by Councilmember Hatfield,
Second.
second by Councilmember Gra to adjourn. Councilmember Hatfield,
Yes.
Councilmember Gra,
Yes.
Councilmember Hubbard,
Yeah.
Councilmember Wong.
Aye.
And Wind Shuttle, yes. If it passes 5-0, we are adjourned, and we will move right into the EDA. Kevin, we can jump right in? Okay, we will call the EDA meeting to order at 10:20. Well, I suppose we have to have roll call. Nate, will you call roll for different people?
Commissioner Hatfield.
Here.
Commissioner Hubbard. Commissioner Wong.
Aye.
Commissioner Gra.
Here.
President Winchell.
Yes, here. Next, we'll move to adopting the agenda, corrections or additions. If not, I'd entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Commissioner Wong, second by Commissioner Hatfield. Discussion. Commissioner Gra,
Yes.
Commissioner Hubbard,
Yes.
Commissioner Wong, Commissioner Hatfield,
Yes.
and President Winchell, yes. Passes 5-0. Moves us to item 4, approving previous meeting minutes. Again, if there are no corrections or additions, I'd entertain a motion.
So moved.
Motion, is that Hubbard?
Yeah.
Motion by Commissioner Hubbard,
Second.
second by Commissioner Hatfield. Discussion. Hearing none. Commissioner Hatfield,
Yes.
Commissioner Wong.
Aye.
Commissioner Hatfield.
Yes, again.
Did I do it wrong again? All right, how about Commissioner Hubbard?
Yes.
All right, Commissioner Gra,
Yes.
H's. And President Winchell, yes, passes 5-0. All right, moves us to action item, adopt resolution EDA 20-9, adopting resolution establishing maximum preliminary Chaska EDA tax levy.
Commissioners and President Commissioners, so the item in front of you tonight is just an extension of what we did for the general fund because the EDA is a separate entity. It has to establish its own maximum tax levy. As I had mentioned before, when we do the analysis of that comparison to other cities, we actually include this levy in there. So you see the whole tax impact, but we have to technically set this levy separate. The one thing I will point out is that you'll notice that this is a 3.53% increase, so it's not impacted by any of those options that we have. CIP, policing, general fund reserves, staffing, it's not impacted by that, so it's really just that base increase, which would bring the proposed levy for 2021 to 17598. And staff is recommending that maximum tax levy, which is resolution 2020-9.
Okay, again, this is just an extension of what we just did, and this is just approving the EDA. It's already been approved in the overall budget. We just have to do a actual vote on this for the EDA. So would anyone like any further discussion? Seeing glossed over eyes. So with that, I would look for a motion to adopt resolution EDA 2020-9.
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Hatfield, second by Commissioner Wong. Discussion. And again, this is EDA 29, which is establishing the maximum preliminary Chaska EDA tax levy. No discussion. Councilmember Commissioner Wong,
Aye.
Commissioner Hatfield,
Yes.
Commissioner Gra,
Yes.
Commissioner Hubbard,
Yes.
President Winchell, yes, passes 5-0. Anyone have anything else for EDA? Nate, anything? Matt? Luke, you're good, I can tell.
Kentucky Fried Chicken.
Oh.
Motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
All right. I have a motion by Commissioner Hatfield. Second by Commissioner Hubbard. Commissioner Hatfield. Yes. Commissioner Gra.
Yes.
Commissioner Hubbard.
Yes.
Commissioner Wong.
Aye.
And President Winchell. Passes 5-0. We are adjourned. We'll see you October 5th. Thanks. Have a good night. Thanks for hanging in there.